And we welcome you to this edition of Night Shift. There as we, Eric Lopez alongside Kyle Nash, Bryson Turner with us here as UCF has just lost in the American Athletic Conference Championship game as their last game as a member of the American Athletic Conference, 45-28. They are celebrating on the field at Yulman Stadium as Tulane. Congrats to them. First time in 24 years they win a conference championship. They'll be going to the Cotton Bowl. Who knows where UCF's going? It doesn't matter. Coming up on this show, we'll break down what went wrong and what does this mean for the program moving forward as they get set to go to the Big 12. Lots of interesting news on and off the field with UCF over the last 24 hours. Oh, by the way, there's a big volleyball match going on in Happy Valley. UCF and Penn State are playing in the round of 32. They are in the third set, 19 all. They're a set apiece in that match. We'll keep you updated on that match going on. In fact, I'm going to dip during this show at some point to cover the postgame show or the postgame pressers for UCF and Penn State as they try to get to the Sweet 16 for the first time in the Division I era. But obviously, a lot of your attentions are on the football side. Send your questions and comments in the chat room as well as in our social media. Bryson, where else can they send us comments and questions?
Send us comments and questions via our social media channels at UCF Banneret SBN. I am actually currently quote tweeting the Twitter version of the stream right now, so you can reply on that tweet for my Twitter at It's Bryson Turner, or you can reply under the Banneret's tweet with the Night Shift at UCF Banneret _SBN, and of course we also have our Facebook Black and Gold Banneret.
Andrew Glukov's also working on his knee-jerk reaction, and that could be lengthy there, Kyle. Let's
1,000-word installment as we come to know and love from Drew, but he'll have a lot of good stuff to say. So check out the knee-jerk reaction on the blackandgoldbanneret.com when it does drop.
All right, let's get into it. UCF loses 45-28. An offensive game, as it turns out. Lots of drama with the quarterback situation. John Rice Plumlee turns out not healthy 100%. No Mikey Keene. He decides, no, I don't want to burn my red shirt, so he doesn't even dress. They burn Thomas Castellanos' red shirt. I know everybody's got comments on that. We'll get into all that. But despite all that, Kyle Nash, my quick thoughts on this is UCF scored 28 points and had a chance at 31-28. With all that I just brought up in the fourth quarter, and the defense just couldn't do anything to slow down Tulane. Tulane ran really, I thought, did a great job with the game plan offensively. Pratt and company throwing the ball underneath against UCF secondary, which is playing back, and then setting up the run with Spears and just big plays against that secondary all game. This defense, Kyle, 2 weeks in a row, really just bad, especially really the last 6 quarters. And I think they're the reason they lost this game. Certainly the offense could have helped in some other ends, and we'll get to that. But my thoughts is, man, this defense was supposed to be the strength of this team, and it let him down today. Your thoughts on the game?
Well, the running game on offense is supposed to be the strength of the team, and it was certainly compromised by John Rice Plumlee and his hamstring situation. I mean, I definitely said as much in the roundtable article leading into the game on the blackandgoldbanneret.com. Bing! But, you know, you make a great point about the defense, Elo, and I feel like, listen, credit to Tulane coach Willie Fritz for making an adjustment and making an observation based on UCF from the first time they played, right? Gentlemen, you've both heard me talk about how this defense in general has a bend, don't break mentality. But here's the thing. If you're sitting back preventing the long play and then you're getting beat on big plays, maybe you should get a bit more aggressive. I don't feel like you saw that adjustment happen, not just in this game, but even in the back half of this game. And I think this is part of the issue that you saw tonight. Granted, I don't want to just completely say that the defense was 100% awful throughout the entirety of the contest. They had more turnovers in this game than they had in a lot of the games outright that they played in 2022. But at the end of the day, those again, big chunks of plays for scores. I mean, we're talking the stuff 60 plus, 40 plus. You can't give that up as a defense and expect to win the football game. Certainly not at the clip as UCF did it tonight.
I think that's a great word you mentioned. They didn't adjust. Lack of adjustment. I just don't understand. And we said the same thing in the East Carolina game. Kyle, this ain't the first time they just refuse to adjust defensively, and I don't understand why. They didn't put really pass rush on Pratt much of the game. Like, mix up your defenses. You know it's not working. Tulane, you know, is attacking you because they know you're playing off. Why not give them some different looks? I think that's the thing that's frustrating, Kyle, is why isn't there adjustments when things aren't going well? It seems like they feel like if we stay with this long enough, it's going to eventually work. But the answer in the last couple of weeks, the answer is no, it hasn't. And I just don't understand that, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest criticism, and again, I'm not the one, you know, necessarily getting or that has the coaching job, and certainly my expertise is not playing at the defensive back position by any stretch of the imagination. But for those third downs where there's 7 yards, 8 yards, and you're still sitting back as far as you are, it's one thing, again, if you're trying to bend, don't break, and not give up the defense. I can't reiterate enough. When you're still giving up the long, big gash of a touchdown play, you've outright failed in the strategy. And you know, I think that's, listen, at the end of the day, that's what broke UCF's back. At the end of the day, we could, and we'll go over it more. I'm not saying we're not going to touch on it. There could be plenty of criticism surrounding the fact of the offensive situation for UCF. But let's be clear, for all the quarterback issues they endured, scoring only, 10 points fewer is kind of an accomplishment considering what all they had to deal with on offense.
Yeah. Bryson, go ahead and chime in because my mom is yelling about Travis Williams too. So I need to calm her down. Everybody's upset at Travis Williams today. So Bryson, go ahead and give me your thoughts here while I take care of my mom and try to calm her down. I don't know why she cares.
Well, I would like to showcase, because on Twitter, I found one account at Light Blue Jesus who says Travis Williams' defense gave up 650 yards to an average offense in a conference championship game. He needs to go before this team gets to the Big 12, before they get embarrassed further. First of all, no. Travis Williams, and maybe Kyle might disagree with me on this, and I'm sure a lot of other people disagree with me on this. But I don't think this is Travis Williams' fault.
Right. It's not an average offense. That's what I would say is wrong first. This is a balanced offense, Bryson, and I think you and I both had that in the round table. But please continue from there. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I had to point
No,
that
I
out.
apologize there. Quick update. Penn State comes from behind to win the third set, 25-22. UCF led most of the third set. In fact, led by 4 at one point, I think 6, and lose. And now they're down to their season 2-1. Oof. Tough set loss for UCF there, Bryson. We'll get into volleyball later. But one thing I can agree, boys, I think today's going to take 5 years out of each of our respective lives. Let's just go with that. Let's get into, wow, there's a ton of comments. So let's just might as well get the fans. Michael White, unprepared, outcoached, and outclassed. That's a strong, obviously upset Michael White. Your thoughts, I mean, give me your thoughts, Kyle, on the coaching staff as a whole. Because there's a lot of things to address. Pulling JRP after the 4th down, for Thomas Castellanos, burning the red shirt, struggle, brought back JRP, defensive adjustments. Your thoughts on the whole staff as a whole?
Well, let me set the table, because Bryson, I think, was about to take it somewhere defensively. Let him get in there on the defense. I think this will address some of that point that comment's making. Go ahead, Bryson.
So I'm going to say that I don't think Travis Williams is the chief reason why we lost this game, because I'll say this. The defensive linemen like Josh Seliskar and the linebackers like Jason Johnson did great today. I actually think that more often than not, they played very well today. The issue is the secondary, and that's not what Travis Williams' description is, because co-defensive coordinator David Gibbs is listed as the secondary coordinator. And if you look at all the the last these 4 scores that really kind of decided the game here all came from 40-plus yard passing plays. The tackling in the secondary, they just could not tackle back there. They were just giving them wide open passes. I think that if the secondary were to have clamped down more on Michael Pratt, who to his credit got 394 passing yards tonight, I think we could be seeing either a different result or at least a much closer one than this.
Your thoughts, Kyle, on that?
Yeah, no, listen, when you got a quarterback throwing damn near for 400, I see where you're coming for, Bryson. But here's where I'm at. The reason why T. Will bear some of the blame here is, first of all, you have a ground game that got damn near 300 yards in its own right. And listen, again, I mentioned that Tulane has a balanced offense. Tulane is not an average offense. Whoever has that in the comments has been paying attention to the fact that there's a reason why Tulane is a top 20 ranked team. They beat Kansas State. By the way, who is now a conference champion of the conference UCF's about to go to. So please, I don't want to hear about Tulane as average. That being said, they are balanced. That's what makes them
balanced. Great word. Spears was fantastic as well as a running back. There's a reason he was the player of the year in the league.
But the reason why T. Will does bear some portion of the burden is because bend don't break has been the strategy, the mantra of this defense throughout the entire year. And again, no adjustments were made to Matt on 3rd and longs, and those were converted in a lot of cases by Tulane, right? And I haven't even looked at the 3rd down conversion rate yet. What is that? 6-4-23.
Bryson, you got the stats there. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that they had 23 3rd down attempts is in and of something. By the way, side note, 7 of 10 on 4th down. Good God. So yeah, I say all that to say, if that's what's happening on defense, some of it at some point does have to go to T. Will. He does have to step in and make adjustments and work with his crew. But your point about the secondary, Bryson, is not lost on me, and I appreciate you bringing it in.
Kevin Suarez, I'm glad that Mikey did what he did. It showed Gus should have put his ego aside and put the best quarterback out there. Many players and recruits are leaving. That you're wrong, Kevin. First of all, the best quarterback was on the field today. It was JRP. He was the best quarterback, and you saw it why today. Without JRP, they get blown out in this game. Mikey Keene nearly single-handedly cost them the game last week. And I know everybody's saying, look, Mikey Keene's got to do what's best for him with the 4 games. But the fact is, it's a selfish decision what he did today. He bailed on his team. And I'm not saying it's the wrong decision. He's got to do what's best for him. And then from his standpoint, he probably thinks, I didn't get the fair shake at quarterback. Let me go another opportunity. But the facts are, Kyle, he put this team in a bad spot today. Put him in a bad spot.
Well, I mean, if we're being fair, nobody can predict injuries and how that went. I'm not going to put it all on Mikey Keene. And you and I kind of talked about this a bit last week on Night Shift after the USF game.
We played the clip. He was asked by Trace, would he forego the 4 games? He said, I want to win a championship. Now, to your point, Kyle, because we discussed this off the air, it's unfair to ask him right in the moment after the game. A lot of emotions, adrenaline, right?
Those are all great points. That's not even where I'm going. I'm actually building on another point, Eric Lopez.
Sure.
With the first game against Tulane, John Rice Plumlee was dealing with a head injury and a concussion and all of that, right? However, when you're a quarterback who depends on mobility, if you can recover from the concussion, you're in a better state than having to deal, obviously, with a hamstring. I don't think anybody's going to argue that John Rice Plumlee was the same JRP that UCF fans have come to enjoy, whether you are a JRP fan or a JR Powder, nonetheless. Right? The escapes, that 4th and 1 you mentioned, Elo, which I could make an argument that was a horrible spot by the officials. The ball went down first, not his knees. Now, granted, you want to talk about where his elbow was or whatever. The official was not kind on the spot of that. Maybe he still didn't get it. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'm with you. Bringing in Castellanos, I think, and granted, what else could Gus do if he was looking for an alternative to try to keep JRP out of harm's way with his hamstring, noting that he wasn't as fast? At the very least, guys, we've seen tonight that Gus's confidence at times, at the very least, was waning in JRP's ability to complete passes, and that led to Castellanos coming on the field, frankly, still looking unready, as both me and
the young man was in a tough spot for the young man.
I'm saying TC is bad by any stretch.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. I retweeted I quote tweeted this earlier in the game, but the one person that I think that truly knows what Mikey Keene is going through right now, and of course he's also beloved by the UCF community, is Mackenzie Milton. He tweeted three hours ago, shout out to Mikey Keene for getting this team to this game and the special young man he is. I understand the business decision he had to make today for his career, and I expect great things for his future. Once a night, always a night. I think a key emphasis here in Milton's tweet is that Keene got them to this game because of the saves that he made. Now, granted, he did have a bad game in the last one. I'm not arguing.
And
that.
the Navy game,
his
fumble was the difference in the game.
I'm not arguing that he messed up, but the wins that he did get got the Knights to this point. And at this point, you know, he has to have a certain number of times in order to get the attention of the NFL if he wants to move forward. And Milton had the exact same thing. The team was in Dylan Gabriel's hands, and so Milton went elsewhere because it was already in DG's hands. This team is in JRP's hands. And I think this game tonight, if anything, proved that and proved that Mikey Keene is making the right decision here, because this is JRP's team.
Except if Mikey Keene was available to play, he's probably coming in relief instead of Thomas Castellanos in the game. I mean, that's just, this whole quarterback saga this year has just been wild. It's been wild. And I think if nothing else we've learned, this staff next year has to figure out who's their quarterback and just call it a day. And we got to, and I got to tell you something, this whole thing about 4 games and the red shirts, man, I just think it was just this cloud over the team the whole year, Kyle. I just wonder if this was counterproductive at the end of the day, because and part of it is social media's fault, because we dissect every play. So every time there's an incomplete pass, get him out with any quarterback. And it just wasn't a healthy situation all year. I don't care what anybody says on that. How can anybody just say this was a positive experience for the quarterbacks?
No, I hear you, Elo, and I don't think
I'm frustrated.
No, bro, listen, you heard me get the most frustrated after the Navy game when I was calling out all the JR Powders out there proclaiming, "Is this your king?" Right? No, buddy, I get you, but I think this is something. I think this is a learning curve, not just for Gus Malzahn, but all coaches. Right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
We're living in that new world order of the transfer portal being what it is. And you very wisely have pointed out in the past, Elo, that other sports have suffered from this whole air quotes concept of the transfer portal as we're just now knowing it as football fans, right? So with all that in mind, football coaches are making adjustments. Don't be surprised in the future, gentlemen, if you see some of these earlier non-conference games become blowouts by way of style points where you don't necessarily see the second string guy as much, or even the third string guy, if it happens to be a situation similar to, Keene or Castellanos or all that. I think, and Elo, the storyline regarding the quarterbacks, listen, there's a reason why we're talking about it already as this possible story of the year in the Bannies for the quarterback situation. Yeah, I can tease the Bannies in December. Come at me, bro. But there's a reason why we're talking about the storyline being this big a deal for this season, guys. And that's because listen, the young and the restless was never this good, or so my sources tell me. That's all I'm saying.
Here's the problem. Can you imagine 2 years from now, we're going to expand the 12-team playoff. What would have happened with this team? Let's say UCF would have won today, make the playoff. You're going to tell me they're going to get by with JRP and what? Like, this is a problem in college football. This is an issue about take the guy. I mean, Kelly Bryant a few years ago did the same thing with Clemson when they moved to Trevor Lawrence as the quarterback. He's like, I'm just going to enter. I'm going to leave during the season. We're going to have a problem here. I think people think that going to 12-team playoff is going to solve a lot of things. It might solve some things, but it's going to create some issues. I still think you're going to have players enter the portal and not play in playoff games, because unless we figure out what to do with this whole redshirt thing, because it's now affecting decisions on the field. And listen, I think there's a portion of the fan base that's not happy about the decision. There's some that understand it. Like I said, he has every right to make this decision. But you can't deny it, just that it didn't benefit the team at all. And I think that's going to leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, Kyle, because we're used to saying team first, right? Win a championship. And he basically walked away from that.
But are we sure that he would have made things better for the team?
Oh, I'm not saying he would have, in fairness. But
That's more for the fans who are like, he was so selfish. Listen, it's possible for a decision to benefit both parties. And I think that concept needs to at least put out into the universe so people understand it. Bryson, I see you raising your finger. Go ahead, buddy.
Yes, because one big thing that I really feel like is getting lost in all this Keene versus JRP debate, because you have these JRP fans and you have these Keene fans, because on the team, these guys are very likable. Like, I think that it's shown with both teams that the guys are used to playing with them and they love to play with them. Thomas Castellanos, he hasn't had that much time to do that yet. If anything, I think this outcome goes back to the USF game where Mikey Keene burnt his red shirt there. If anything,
he played his fourth game.
Right, because I think that move right there was kind of the big difference maker here, because if you don't play Mikey Keene in that game,
well, the Navy game, you could say the same thing about the Navy game. If you don't have to play him in the Navy game, I mean, it just caught up with that. I feel for Thomas. He got put in a tough spot, right? Had to burn the red shirt. That's what I'm more upset about. And I think the question is, should Gus have just stayed with JRP? Like, he brought him back, and he looked pretty good out in the pocket and just play with there. Obviously, the Keene thing threw a lot of things for a monkey wrench, and probably at the end is why UCF's not playing in a major bowl at the end of the day, right? Like, and among other things.
Well, and I think Coach Malzahn put it best even on Monday, right? Apparently, John Rice hasn't been 100% healthy for some time.
Right.
And I think, and I don't know that he meant to do this, but the thing I picked up is he compared John Rice Plumlee to Cam Newton, which is great when you're more than 6 feet and over 200 pounds, which John Rice Plumlee is not. So at the end of the day, wear and tear become a factor. And now you understand why Gus Malzahn is recruiting at the quarterback position the way he is. The Will Bones, the Timmy McClains, the extra air quotes bodies, lacking a better word, filling that room. And if Mikey Keene doesn't want to be those bodies to be thrown into the press, so to speak, if he wants to do, lacking a better example, but listen, DJ Mack went to Old Dominion his way, and actually ended up helping UCF, oddly enough, somehow. I forget the math and all that, but the punchline is, if a guy can do better for himself while also creating space for the program to recruit guys that fit the system better, again, win-win is a possibility in situations like this. It's just unfortunate that Plumlee's hamstrung the offense the way it did in the championship game. That's just an unfortunate kind of collateral damage, lacking a better way to put it.
Well, especially when you have an offensive line that had its issues once again, right? I mean, Kyle, I mean, we've kind of touched on this.
Yeah.
I still remember you with that one play where Tylen Grable just kind of completely missed his block and he got sacked. And I remember you going off in the group chat like, oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, let me show my credentials for a minute with the Aaron Evans original painting behind me of my playing days. And yeah, it kind of hurt my soul a little bit to see him get blown up like that on that particular play. Granted, we're commenting on one play that I texted about in a group chat amongst us, but yeah, it was that was one of several struggles. But again, I feel like the game planning in the second half kind of adjusted for that. They started to do things that were different. You know, they kind of got their composure back after throwing Castellanos out there and it not working. To Plumlee's credit, listen, I'm not here telling you he's going to break any passing records, but he did a pretty good job throwing the football. Certainly one could argue among the best he's done on the year. And
I thought he played hard. I thought he gave him a chance. I admire what he did.
Nobody's going to argue Plumlee's hard even going into this game. Yeah. Certainly. And listen, credit to Isaiah Bowser doing some things in every facet of the game, receiving, running, blocking. You know, they gave their guys, I think, a chance late, but now we're back to the defense getting broken open against a Tulane group that is balanced. You know, the metaphor I make, guys, is maybe that Bill Murray was never the best comedy actor of his time, but he was always top four. right? Tulane may not be the best passing and they may not be the best running, but they can do both well enough to where you got to worry about both and you can get spread thin. And that's what happened to UCF's defense tonight.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it's fair.
Bring this forward. I have this up. This is a comparison.
Bryson's going next level, baby. Woo!
We're going split screen over here. This is a comparison of the box score between last Tulane game, which, by the way, feels like a year ago at this point,
right,
and tonight's game right here. If basically the UCF defense just gave up more yardage in absolutely every capacity. Tajay Spears had 130 yards last time. He had 199 yards this time. Michael Pratt, 236. Now he has 394. And, of course, he unlike last time, and I think this is the big thing, no 100-yard receivers on Tulane squad last time. 2 of them this time.
Well, Bryson, let me put my data professional hat and ask you the question, because you've technically answered it already, but I want to see if you could put the data difference together in your mind. What was different this game versus last?
Plumlee was in there the entire time.
No, sir. Defensively, giving up bigger plays. That led to more yardage. That led to another touchdown for Pratt. That led to more yardage for all the air quotes skill players. 100%. Like, because if you look at it, the number of passes completed, not too different, you know, and yet
less actually. Pratt completed less passes than he did last time.
Now you're getting it, my guy. Well done.
And that's just kind of goes back to the state of
tackling. Well, Tulane won the battle in the line of scrimmage, didn't they, Kyle? I mean, wasn't this at the end of the day? UCF won the battle in the trenches the first meeting. Tulane won it in the second meeting.
Overall, I think that's defensible. But again, I think John Rice Plumlee with a bad hamstring can't hide mistakes as good as he normally can, right? And we talked about this this a bit last week, Elo, right, in the USF game, where the Bulls committed to attacking on the outside, had a 3rd and long in the first drive, and a healthy, air quotes, healthy Plumlee takes it to the hizzy for a touchdown. He can't do that in his injured state, right? I wonder what injured Plumlee running is versus Mikey Keene running. Like we keep talking about, well, Keene can't run, you know. I wonder if they're equal at this point running wise. I say all that to say, if a tackle misses a block and a defensive end overcommits trying to attack, Plumlee could not turn that into a touchdown tonight. And I feel like that was definitely something Willie Fritz was trying to capitalize on. And I know there were times you were critical of Tulane's head coach making
going for it on 4th down early,
making some of the aggressive calls that he did, but I think he was trying to test out exactly where Plumlee was. I'm not saying you were wrong in your observations. I think he was trying to test the water.
Willie Fritz said at the half to Tom Luginbill that he admitted he went overboard on the advanced analytics, that the advanced analytics told him to go for it. I mean, you know what? Give him credit for admitting he made a mistake. He followed the analytics. Hey, look, it didn't matter for him at the end. By the way, if you see me praying and nervous right now, it's because volleyball is in the 4th set. 17 all. They led by 4 earlier in the set. Penn State's come back to tie it up. Penn State's up 2-1. UCF has to win the set to force a 5th set or their season is over. We'll keep you posted as soon as that ends there. Let me give you some quick comments. Roger Greenberg, I feel we had them, but we just couldn't get the job done. It just didn't that feel like, wait, Kyle, like it seemed like every time UCF, okay, here we go. They got a chance. They force a turnover. Oh, here we got Tulane would just smack them with a big play. It just seemed like anytime UCF had momentum, Tulane had an answer. Give them credit for that.
It was either, there would be a turnover, Tulane would answer, or there would be a big play. The official would say it was an incomplete pass, like for the big ball, for example. I forget exactly who caught.
You thought that was a catch by Baker.
I didn't see it hit the ground, and if it did, fine, that's cool. But I mean, eventually I would come to change my opinion of the holy holler. I thought that was out of bounds at first too. It is what it is. But regardless of what I feel about it, the call on the field didn't go UCF's way in that instance. So, but I think it was a culmination of moments like that where just when the Knights were trying to get some rallying points, then something else would go wrong. Listen, Any UCF defeat, for the most part, except for I'm going to say Louisville, was a combination of issues that ended up being more than you can only shoot yourself in the foot so many times, guys, before you could stop walking appropriately, right?
Agreed. Agreed on that. And I give you credit. You did not feel good about this game pregame, to your credit.
Me nor Lukov both predicted a 38.
I'm glad you two are finally agreeing and on the same page, because for a while there, I was worried about the two of you.
That was about him being a Buckeye homer the same way you cheer for your Knowles, buddy.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fine. It's 18-all right now in the fourth set.
Oh, if you see me looking screen left, that is where I have the game on my TV right now.
Brian Murphy, send some alcohol to us. 1918 Penn State, fourth set. Oh boy. How about Jeff Wiseman? Jeff Wiseman talking about Pratt punching a player and not getting a flag. He didn't punch the player. That's a little exaggerated. It was a push.
I'll put it this way. It was a little thing that just didn't get caught, and the cameras caught it where the officials didn't. I agree with the statement. That is what it is, man. I mean, so you think that 15-yard penalty would really make that big of a deal in the outcome of this game? Because I don't.
Quarterbacks tend to get away with a lot of that stuff too, don't they?
Well, I mean, listen, as an offensive lineman, do you expect me to argue that quarterbacks get special treatment? Separate. Next question. Let's move on.
By the way, please, let's not. I don't want to blame the officials. The officials had nothing to do why they lost this game. Can we agree on that? Tulane was the better team today.
Overall.
Tulane was the better team. And you know what? They deserve to win the game. They caught some good fortune because Cincinnati lost their starter to an injury. UCF loses a quarterback that isn't dressed. The other one's hurt. I mean, maybe it was just destined to be Tulane's deal, man. Sometimes, it's just your year sometimes.
To your credit, Elo, I believe the words you used last week were team of destiny over the Thanksgiving holiday there. So there you go.
Yeah, and I look, good for them, man. Good for them. That team won 2 games. They fight for respect in that area. They don't get a lot of support because that's an LSU town. I wonder if I think UCF fans, we would agree on this. At least we didn't lose to Cincinnati, right? Like if we're going to lose this title game, I'm okay losing it to Tulane. If this would have been Cincinnati, for example, I think it'd be even more miserable. But Tulane, it's a good story. That's a good story. I mean, they're going to do it. That's the biggest win in that program's history. They're going to play in the Cotton Bowl. We know that feeling, right? I mean, give them credit. I mean, that was a cool scene. I know we didn't enjoy it, but the fans going on the field and celebrating, that's a thing they'll never forget. So I'm not going to say the officials had this or that. Give them credit. Give them credit. I mean, great credit.
This isn't like the Navy game where there was a bunch of missed calls or anything that could have changed the life of the game in and of itself. These are just little moments that just happen in general in football, man. Listen, I get you. And I'll put it this way. You're the bold prediction guy on this panel currently, Elo, along with you, Lukov, on the Black and Gold.
I'm about to have a heart attack, so I might be the wrong guy to ask about bowl games right now.
But you have to admit, of the teams you forecasted in the Cotton Bowl against whoever the American would send, I would make a very strong argument that in its current form, Tulane is a better matchup to some of these other teams they're forecasting, right? Because I've heard Tennessee, I've heard USC in games where you're expecting a shootout. You got to admit, Tulane's a better fit to battle in that game and have a real shot to win.
At this point, absolutely. At this point, you are. I tend to agree. I think Tulane, they will be fired up. They're going to, anybody that went to school there is going to go to Dallas. I think that, we're a banged up team. By the way, Penn State now has served incredible. And they are up 21-19 in the fourth set. They're 4 points away from closing this out. They are serving
22-19. They just got another
ace. Another ace. I mean, their serving has been fantastic down the stretch, and the Knights right now are in big trouble. Sorry, Kyle. I'm turning in my volleyball broadcast here.
There's a lot of quality sport going on. I respect.
Oh my Lord! I mean, this is just
had nothing to do with it. I agree with that too. I got no beef.
22-19 Penn State. UCF just got the point here. Don't spoil it, Bryson. I've got it on video.
I mean, look, I was going to say, look, Tulane. The story of Tulane on its own. I am purely great with that. You know what? Tulane deserved it. There was a reason.
And I was wrong on Tulane, for the record. I've been wrong about them all.
There was a reason that I thought that Tulane would have been a trap game.
Here we go. There we go.
No, hey, I just got the time wrong. Like, to Kyle's credit, I just got the time wrong. But you know who is probably over the moon by the results of this game? One Mike Oresco.
Because, listen, if you heard,
right. No, you're right. Mike's happy.
If you heard my question of him at the Zoom conference at the American, that's certainly evidence to support Bryson's theory.
Tulane is probably going to be a very big, because if you're going to have to replace UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, having Tulane on this uptick like it's been is a good start to that. And it is 23-21 now. It is getting really close in Happy Valley.
Yeah, I mean, they got to really serve well here down the stretch. Yeah, Mike Oresco, this is big for the American. For Tulane to win, they get to stay. How about Tulane as a whole? Willie Fritz, a week ago, looked like he was leaving for Georgia Tech. Something happened where something changed. He stays. What a week for Tulane. What a week for the American. Good for them.
I mean, are we calling Brent Keys built by UCF for taking over Georgia Tech? I mean, is that the angle? I'm throwing it out there.
Match points for Penn State. 3 match points, 24-21. Penn State a point away from closing this out and closing McKenna Melville, the greatest volleyball player in UCF history, his career, down to match point here. So let's stay with this for a second, Kyle. Unless you want, you could play your Karch Karai card here. I'll call you Kyle Karai, the great volleyball player of all time. But Penn State here about to serve.
Oh, it's an ace.
Bryson! It's an ace.
It came over.
And Penn State has won in 4 sets. They have knocked off UCF in 4 sets. And this, folks, is officially a miserable day for UCF. A day that started with women's basketball getting blown out of the court at Auburn. Yeah. Football loses. And now, unfortunately, McKenna Melville's career has come to an end, and Amber Olsen, and your heart breaks for those 2 young ladies. Oh, but Penn State won, and UCF once again denied of a Sweet 16. Me and Bryce are going to break down volleyball later in the show. Brandon Hellwig is reporting that Alex Golish is in line to be the next South Florida head coach. Wow. This night is getting busier, folks. Folks, tell your friends. We're going to be on for a while here. Night Shift. Follow us right now on the YouTube channel. Tell your friends. Call your friends. Tell them that right now. We're going to be on for a while. We got a lot to still cover.
He says he's hearing buzz. He said he's hearing buzz. From what I know.
Oh, my God.
Let's be careful with that, right? We've heard John Gruden and Deion Sanders. And Jamie Chadwell. At this point, I believe nothing until I hear it confirmed.
That's a great point. That's a great point on that. All right, let me ask you this, Kyle, and then I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm probably going to bolt here because I got to get ready for what is without question going to be a very difficult postgame and an emotional postgame with volleyball. So it could be a little while, guys. But Bryson will be in good hands with Bryson and Kyle. Is this season a disappointment for football? Is this season a disappointment, a failure, or a good season? How do you critique this season now, Kyle?
I mean, certainly the fans are going to find it a disappointment because they've already kind of leaned into it with the persona that they are a Big 12 team already, whether they are or not. So to not get the championship is certainly going to be a sour taste in their mouths. But that being said, technically speaking, they were fighting for it where they weren't last year. So from that standpoint, it's definitely an improvement. I feel like depending on what the bowl placement is and who it is that they play and have the possibility to beat, I'll put it this way. If this group with the quarterback issues and the health issues that we're seeing turns out a victory at a bowl game, depending on the opponent, they could still get something out of it. I'm not saying it's going to be UF and Gasparilla big, but it could be something that certainly keeps the conversation going into the upgrade into the Big 12.
I want to hear from the fans. You guys have been awesome all year. What do you think? Disappointing season? Failure? Good season? I want your thoughts on that. Bryson will read some of that, some deals there. Jeff Wiseman saying if we get a win in a decent bowl game, then all things considered is a good season. Does the bowl game play a role in your decision, Kyle, in this season's debut? Because obviously last year playing Florida in Gasparilla and beating Florida, I think certainly turned that season to a positive for a lot of people.
Unquestionably.
Right.
Unquestionably. That's historical stuff, man.
Now, we don't know where UCF's going to play bowl game. It could be military, could be Birmingham, could be Gatling. I mean, we don't know yet. As soon as we hear something, if we do while we're on the air, we'll certainly break that down. But certainly send your comments here. Let's see. Lonely Bumblebee. Anything less than a conference championship is a disappointment at this point.
Yeah, and I'm not saying.
I mean, that's a fair. I mean, that's the standard here. That's the standard.
Right.
I actually don't disagree with. But Kyle, you've gotten so far, man. You've gotten here so far. Like, you might as well just win the sucker. And it's just, and the thing that hurts, Kyle, here's why I think it's disappointing. And I'm going to get ready to go because Bryson's like telling me to go. But you and I were there at the Navy game. If they beat Navy, they're probably hosting this championship game. Who knows what that could mean? This was a season of what ifs. If they beat East Carolina, they probably would have hosted game day. Didn't work out. If you beat Navy, you're probably hosting this championship game. Didn't happen. If you win this game today, you're going to the Cotton Bowl. None of it happened. The way this season finished, Kyle, losing to Navy, if you want to call it a win against South Florida, but that was a near catastrophic second half. That even Mark Daniels, and I agree with him, that would have been the worst loss in the program's history. Right. The way it would have unfolded. And now this loss, I think it's a little disappointing, at least a finish to the year.
Yeah, no, it's a downtrodden finish, but at the end of the day, we have seen teams with injured quarterbacks do a lot worse. Oklahoma State, Tennessee falling apart. We can go with that too. Teams losing and having injuries to their starting quarterback position is problematic. And for UCF to find their way to navigate what they did could in itself kind of be seen as a win. But I'm not mad at fans who feel anything less than American championship is a bust. That's fair too.
Wade, volleyball loses in the second round again. Bryson and I will address that, Wade, later in the show. Bryson, don't comment on volleyball. Save it when I get back, whenever I get back.
I just have one question for you, Mr. Bowl predictions expert. Is there an ACC AAC bowl game?
Yeah, the military bowl. That's why I think if you're UCF, that's probably the bowl you want to go. I know people are trying to push for Gasparilla. Some people are saying they would rather play a MAC team in the Gasparilla. Nobody would give a flying flip about that.
No, they would not.
No, FSU's not going to. FSU is probably going to go with the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando. Kyle will probably see them in person. Next year, though, when UCF's in the Big 12, they would be eligible to play in the Cheez-It Bowl.
Assuming I don't travel, Eric, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, that's the other question. Where they're going to travel.
The Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, because now there's
there's a lot of Cheez-It.
I didn't know that Citrus Bowl. Stop complicated things, Bryson.
All right. Bryson,
post game.
Bryson, I will play. I am JRP. I'm going to pull out. Please perform better than Thomas Castellanos. The rest of the show, I'll come back like JRP came back in the game. Hopefully, though, you'll be more like Mikey King, Circle, Cincinnati than Thomas Castellanos. Sorry, Thomas. I love you, but it's not your fault. Okay? Not your fault. Bryson, take over the show. We'll be back. More night shift. Keep the comments coming, guys. You've been awesome so far. I'll give you reports from the volleyball post game here in a little while.
Thank you very much, Eric. And you are watching Night Shift. If you're listening to this afterwards, you're listening to Night Shift after this. I am Bryson Turner. With me is Kyle Nash. Eric Lopez is off covering the post-game press conference for volleyball, which he and I will cover later on in the show. But right now, I didn't get a chance to answer this question because Eric and Kyle need to answer this before Eric left. But on the question of, is this season a disappointment? Because I'm seeing a little bit of a 50-50 difference, maybe a little bit of a lean towards improvement. And I remember saying before this season started, Kyle, that this season is this lame duck season in the American is something of you basically have nothing to lose but everything to gain, I think. And we didn't gain because we were going to go to the Big 12 either way. So in a sense, it technically didn't matter how this season played out unless you're talking about momentum to the Big 12. But obviously, you want to close the season out with a conference championship to bookend your time in the American, and you didn't do that. But to your point, you also mentioned that we are actually in the conference championship last season. This season we weren't last season. I think that this really boils down to the fact that I think that a lot of fans know the talent that this team has. I mean, the defense started off this year pretty darn good, and then they just completely, I would argue, just kind of stumbled across the finish line in these last 3-4 games. And then you have this offense that kind of had to figure itself out, but couldn't really get anything going until it's too late, really. Or if they didn't score first, then they were pretty much helpless. So it just seemed like the two units just weren't able to really get on the same page this season. And with the individual talent both of them showed, I think fans just kind of expected a little bit better and expected them to kind of align, and they just didn't.
No, there's something to that. I think there's a hype element there too, right? Especially last year when it's one thing when you have the blanket of injuries to kind of buy yourself a year, so to speak, right? When you had as much of what was going on, I'm not going to forget the look on Coach Malzahn's face leading into Gasparilla when I asked him, hey, this bowl could represent the healthiest you've been since the start of the season. He kind of stopped and acknowledged it is true. So, when that's the case, you kind of, when you have a throwaway season, yet you're able to turn around and do something as historical as beat UF, you're able to kind of cash your chips in and still kind of play with house money and turn around with that. This season, injuries didn't have the same impact quantity-wise, but it was very evident at the quarterback position. Whereas, I know there were times when, you had the Kamari Gamble situation, you had both time with Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker missing time and all that part of it. O'Keefe missed a little time himself, but that was earlier in the season. That was kind of, pushed past for the group. Overall, it kind of felt like the struggles, to your point, were kind of just ups and downs or slumps, if you will, on the offensive line or the defensive backfield or whatever have you. And that's obviously a lot more difficult for fans to consume, right?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think it's so hilarious to me because I feel like I unintended that. If thinking back to the South Carolina State game press conference, I distinctly remember asking John Rice Plumlee about hey, it looked like you were really putting yourself out there, but it kind of looked like, you might get hurt considering the amount of times you've been putting yourself out there. Are you going to like try to avoid that? And he said, and he kind of, said as much that, he's going to try to avoid that. And in the end, he couldn't. And lo and behold, that was my biggest fear with John Rice Plumlee coming into this season, is that he was going to RG3 himself or something and get hurt and get hurt. And lo and behold, that is what happened. And that ended up marring this team the rest of the season, causing Keene to kind of come in there. And, and when he initially did very well, you have then this kind of controversy within the fan base. And this is about fan opinion, by the way. Like, I still think that within the team, they love both. The team really likes working with both of them and all that. But from a fan base perspective, it really caused that to cast a shadow throughout the rest of the season. And I think this season is really going to end up being defined by that JRP Mikey Keene controversy. And I think that's just going to cast a negative light over the entire season, when in reality, it wasn't that bad. Jason Johnson, by the way, has been having one of the best defensive seasons I think that this defense has seen in a decade. And of course, you have Isaiah Bowser in the picture doing the Bowser cat. I thought that was a very great addition to the playbook. Javon Baker was great. Ryan O'Keefe was great as always. We had RJ Harvey have a breakout season, and some of these players are going to come back next season as they start play in the Big 12. Now, granted, it might take us some time to establish ourselves there, but I think that as far as this season goes, I wouldn't say that I am. We left some stuff on the table. Let's put it that way. And whether you're, disappointed whether you're disappointed in that, or you're accepting of that, because sometimes you leave things on the table. When you go into a casino, it is what it is. So I think it's really just depends on your perspective on that. And also, I think in a way, your position in the Keene and JRP controversy.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, with that aside, I think I don't want to bang on the whole Keene versus JRP controversy thing any more than we already have, because we've said it many times here at the Black and Gold Banneret that was less about which quarterback was a better quarterback, air quotes, and who versus who was a better playmaker amongst the skill set and players that they have. What I kind of want to bring in here too, Bryson, is you and I and the rest of the team had different expectations. I was the pessimist among this group. I didn't even think UCF was going to make it to the championship. So to see them playing here, it's hard for me to call it a disappointment. But again, fans may have had a higher expectation than I did. And listen, I'm not knocking that. That's what makes fans fans. Fan is short for fanatic. You believed UCF was a hands down favorite to win the American. No one's taking that right away from you. May the force be with you. And I hope you're out there shouting, your entire lungs out, going wherever UCF's going to their bowl game and cheering for them to win there too, and expecting that to happen. That's totally your right. But where I sat, I didn't think this group with the offensive line, what it was, the defensive front being as inexperienced as they are, was a team that was poised to get a championship. And yet here we are,
Look, I'll say this. JRP coming in when he did at the end, I'm looking now on Twitter and we're seeing kind of some videos from the press conference coming out right now. Jason Beatty from the Orlando Sentinel just tweeted a video where Gus Malzahn said that he said that JRP was one of the toughest players he thinks he's ever coached, and the fact that he went back in, he couldn't say enough good things about John Rice. I mean, I think that's another theme that I've been seeing throughout social media and some of the comments as well, is that if JRP was 100%, then we would have had a different result here. And I'm not going to disagree with that, but there's also the fact that, you have to that I think he came in when he did, and he had like a huge like assist, I guess, coming back in when he did. It just, the defense just kind of couldn't really supplement that, which is kind of what I meant earlier when I said that the offense and the defense weren't never really aligned like that I thought they might at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, no, I'm with that too. I mean, anybody denying that the toughness of JRP, I mean, I make jokes about baseball players all the time, but I mean, John Rice Plumlee has proven himself more than just a baseball player at this junction, right? And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the comments about Ryan O'Keefe. All I can tell you at this point is I haven't heard anything yet, right? But as that news comes, we'll certainly get that out there. But listen, at this juncture, Bryson, anybody who questions John Rice Plumlee's toughness, I got nothing for you.
I'm looking at the by the way, I know that this ending of this game has been a tough one, but I'll tell you what, there was the one moment earlier in the game when I probably was filled with more hope than I had anything. And maybe that's on me. I'm Clint Barton in that scene in Endgame where it's like, don't do it. Don't give me hope. But like a fool I did. But I seeing RJ Harvey make that kind of channel his inner Julian Edelman on that pass. Like because after that tweet where it mentioned that RJ Harvey played quarterback in high school, which I actually did see in real life, by the way. RJ Harvey was in the same district as my alma mater, Haggerty High School, and so I saw him play in my senior year, and I remember him playing quarterback, and to now see him make that throw and make that touchdown. I mean, that I think was kind of a big part of the UCF momentum that they built up later on in the game to get them to within 3.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, if we're surprised by now about Gus Malzahn pulling trick plays out of his hat, that's a whole other conversation. And I think the tweet you're alluding to kind of hinted at RJ Harvey being a more permanent solution at quarterback than something than just a single trick play would administer. But listen, if we're going to see Isaiah Bowser throw a pass in the previous Tulane game, of course, RJ Harvey putting one out there is hardly out of the realm of possibility, under Gus Malzahn. And yeah, I'm with you. That was a big moment. That was certainly a big part of the surge that took place where UCF had a shot late. I mean, they were within 3. Things looked realistic for a minute. And then, unfortunately for UCF, the green wave crashed upon the field and, pulled away and broke the game open late and finished the job.
Now, I know that there's still the bowl game to consider, but I want to kind of give a shout out to Isaiah Bowser, because look, the things that he has been able to do in 2 seasons for this team has been astounding to me. Like he ended up catching a very crucial 4th down catch for that first down. Bowser doesn't really do pass catching that much, but he did it today, and he did it in a very crucial moment. And of course, he dominated the rushing attack, 20 attempts, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Just can you talk about Isaiah Bowser and kind of the here?
And no, that's easy for me to do because I was able to do it earlier in the year already. I believe it was against, and I'm trying to remember what team it was, but it was previous to conference play. I forget if it was the South Carolina State game or I forget the opponent offhand, but this was a designed run for John Rice Plumlee that I'm thinking of, where Isaiah Bowser was a lead block, went in, opened a big old hole for John Rice Plumlee to run through. Plumlee fumbles the ball from behind the play. Bowser comes in, recovers the fumble. UCF gets the gain and a first down out of it because Plumlee, like he does, ran the ball a significant distance down the field. Then the very next snap, Isaiah Bowser catches a 20-plus yard pass to again move the chains and set up what would eventually be a scoring drive. Listen, you mentioned that Isaiah Bowser didn't catch the ball a lot, but the catches he did make, Bryson, were big catches. And probably, I think the turning point for John Rice Plumlee on the season was a check down where he was in big trouble, finds Bowser across the field. I believe this was in the Georgia Tech game, but don't quote me. Finds Bowser entirely across the field, where he then takes it for a 3rd and long, turns it into a movement of the chains. And again, it's not, I kind of liken it to, if you go back far enough, where the Seattle Seahawks had Marshawn Lynch catching passes from Russell Wilson. It's not that he's a receiver who's, your first thought is, Skittles and beast mode is going to be catching a pass. That's not it. But darn it, he's perfectly capable of doing it over and above what he can do in protection for this group and compensating for offensive line early on that had issues in its chemistry. So for a guy that can do everything, there's a reason why Gus Malzahn said going into and late into last season, even going into this season, late into last season, that Bowser is an NFL caliber running back. And the bad news there is, Bryson, whatever the bowl game is, don't be surprised if you see Isaiah Bowser sit this one out, because he's going to be heading into the draft. I can't front on that.
I'm seeing some comments that are bringing up speculation on who's entering the transfer portal. Just remember, to this point, the ones that we know are going to be in there are punter and holder Andrew Osteen, and of course linebacker Terrence Lewis. First, on that point, December 5th. Well, he hasn't said anything yet. Remember, December 5th is, I believe, the day when the portal officially opens. I mean, people can say they're going into the portal, but they can't do it until December 5th. Or if you're a grad transfer, I believe you can do it whenever. But in the case, do it whenever. But I think that the big thing to keep in mind about that is, one, they're going to make their decision when they make their decision, and that's their decision to make. Mikey Keene made his decision, what he think was best for us. Everyone else is going to do that. Now you mentioned on this game, he mentioned one of the rumors was about JJB and Morris and MAR in the transport. I want to ask you, Kyle, about the defense really quick, because we talked about the big plays, right? We talked about how the big plays just seem to really kill UCF in this one. I mentioned that the four touchdown plays that Tulane had were 40 yards or more.
Good stuff.
How much would you say it? Because sometimes big plays just kind of happen. Something slips through. When do you think you kind of notice the point where it's like, oh man, they're giving up a lot of yardage on like single plays. Like when it's just like, oh, it's a big play, it just kind of it's just kind of a fluke, to this is an issue.
Well, okay, so that's a good question. The comparison I would give you is there was basically one big play in the Louisville game where Malik Cunningham took a big run to the house. You knew Malik Cunningham was a threat. You knew it was a possibility. If you walk away with it with Malik Cunningham getting one long running touchdown, that's an acceptable loss. That's something you expect to happen. That's what he's really good at. In this juncture, Bryson, and as much as I preached about Tulane being a balanced offense, at some point you have to be prepared for the concept that the down and distance is going to dictate what they do, right? If they gash you for a run of more than 8 yards, the defensive front has a bigger problem. This is why you lock in your secondary, cover the pass, and don't let yak happen in front of you. That gets that first down, that moves the chains. And passing wise, I think you'll even observe that that's what happened, right? When it's not that they're necessarily catching the ball at the line to gain, Bryson, is that, and this isn't just Tulane, by the way, I feel like this is something UCF has given up all year. The ball's caught previous to the line to gain for the first down, and then the opponent through yards after the catch, takes it across and moves the chains. Third down is a big down for any team on defense. And I'm not necessarily rewriting the football books here on how to do it with academia, regarding studying the game of football. The student of the game isn't just a clever nickname for me, but at the end of the day, when you're turning in more than, forget touchdowns, Bryson, though, again, your stat about how many touchdowns 40 yards and up were given up, that's the kind of thing that breaks a game wide open. But just the difference between, if it's a close one-score game, like let's say 17-14, the difference can be in how many third downs you give up, right? So giving up the play in front of you where then they can run it across to get the first down anyway, let alone turn it into a 40-plus yard touchdown, is a rough situation, and one where you have to start making adjustments, especially when it's been happening all year long. That's what I think it kind of answers your question.
I think the other big difference I'm noticing over here is Tulane getting to the quarterback. But if you combine sacks and QB hurries to say, like, quarterback, I don't know, interferences, like that can be kind of a stat that we can make up. Tulane did so 10 times. And UCF has only managed to do it once. You're the offensive line expert, so how talk to me? I mean, I know I put you on the spot a little bit about the Grable situation, but tell me what you saw here and what you really saw of this offensive line this season, because it feels like they might have. I think they had a little bit of a stretch in there where maybe it looked like things were looking up for them, and then we have performances like this.
Right. So what is it I've said in the past is if you have a mobile quarterback that can escape trouble, it kind of hides it kind of hides issues you might be having when a pressure is given up or allowed, right? So to take last week against USF as an example, Bryson, USF was attacking the outsides and the tackles hard, especially early in the game. That's how a 3rd and 10 plus turned into a touchdown for John Rice Plumlee for UCF's first score of the game. What should have been a defensive win for the Bulls was a score for UCF because of an overcommitment where they attacked the tackles who, Ryan Swoboda is named first team all conference at tackle, be that as it may. The attack was coming outside, a big hole opens up in the middle, and John Rice Plumlee turns it to a score. When you have a threat like that compels defensive fronts to attack in disciplined fashion, keep gaps, not commit and sell out to attacking the passer, it's a lot easier to block. Because speaking from my perspective, if a defensive lineman does one of two things, if they try a spin move on me where I can feel it, I put them on the ground. If they're hesitant in attacking, I can get inside and dominate them. If they're trying to watch, I can drive them back, making it an easier run block. But if they're able to just be aggressive and have dictate where I go, they put themselves in a better position to blow up the play as they see it start to form up. And I think an element of these sacks, this one, there was certainly some plays where the offensive line was compromised, no question. I'm not defending my fellow big man brethren up there in the trenches, but I think some of this too were the players themselves, Coach Malzahn, Thomas Castellanos, John Rice Plumlee, all kind of figuring out where they were in the game. John Rice Plumlee's testing it out. Hey, I normally can escape here. Can I do it this time? Oh, heck, I can't. And too many times those guesses, air quotes, didn't go UCF's way. And I think that's a big part of why you see that stat tonight. This isn't like Navy, where clearly UCF was dominated up front. Some of this was a matter of, I'm going to try to run this and see if I can make it to the edge. Oh, wait, I can't. My hamstring's bad. Or I made a decision too late on a few plays like Thomas Castellanos did. This isn't me saying I think Thomas Castellanos is bad. I'm actually looking very forward to what he does in the offseason leading into the next year to see what it is that he can tweak. I'm not here to say he's Mackenzie Milton, but we saw how big a jump he made after getting booed off the field in the Cure Bowl to then become one of the favorite players in Knight's history, right?
Yeah, yes, I completely agree with that. I remember, you mentioned with Plumlee like this indecision to scramble. I noticed on that last drive that where UCF, had a chance and they needed to get the 4th down in order to keep that alive, that JRP really only scrambled when he absolutely had to in order to evade defenders. And he had to do that a lot. And I noticed that he had some open field in front of him, on that 4th down play. And I'm thinking oh, okay, he can go and run it, but there's a Tulane player coming up behind him and he manages to bring him down. A 100% John Rice Plumlee, I think, could have escaped that defender, but because of the hamstring situation, I don't think he did. But we do actually have we can get a little bit of a more expert or eyewitness opinion on that, because Trace Trocco, friend of the show from Sons of UCF, has posted his videos from the post-game press conference conference, and Gus Malzahn commented on JRP's health along with a couple of other topics. So let's go ahead and hear what Gus Malzahn had to say.
Yeah, I'm curious.
That was a little bit of technical glitch there.
So no, yeah, this will be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Here it is.
One of the toughest players I think I've ever coached. I mean, his hamstring was bad, all week. He practiced, but that 4th and 1, he just couldn't get around the corner right there, and so felt like there would go with Tommy and give him a shot. Tommy did some really good things. He's going to be a phenomenal quarterback. It was just he was put in a tough spot. But the fact that he wanted to go back in and he went back in, gave us a spark. Can't say enough, good things about John Rice.
Coach, what went into the decision to make Thomas Castellanos the backup quarterback today?
He was our number 2 guy. Obviously Mikey didn't dress, and really the first year, me and Mikey had a conversation. We were going to do our best to try to, honor that before game, so we didn't lose eligibility. And unfortunately, we had to play him last week. And I'll say this: we wouldn't be here without him. And but Thomas is going to be a great quarterback in his own right. John Rice really behind the corner.
John Rice, talk about the week of practice. How did you feel all week? How did you feel going into the game today?
At this point of the year, everybody's got something, cut, bruises, bumps. And it's just one of those things that, just like everybody else, like Scar has a hamstring issue going on too, and it's just one of those things that you rehab and you try to get better, try to get to 100%, and obviously practice. I did what I could do, and ultimately tried everything to be able to play the game. That was the goal. Whether if it was 85% or if I was 90%, if I was 100%, I wanted to be able to play this game. So we tried to prepare as such.
And that was Gus Malzahn, followed by John Rice Plumlee talking about the health situation in the QB situation. Kyle, what are your thoughts on what the two of them had to say?
I mean, yeah, nothing surprising there. I mean, to that point, you know, throughout the week, Gus had mentioned that John Rice was practicing, that he was, you know, going, it was going relatively well. Obviously, he's not going to come out and say, well, he's basically stone-footed and can't move. He wants the other guy to prepare accordingly. And listen, to Coach Willie Fritz's credit, a guy who's been lifting up Tulane since he got there. I know he had a bit of a stumble in the COVID year and then the year following, but yeah, even last year, this was a team that Malzahn had mentioned that he sees a lot of promise in, even though they only won 2 games last year. Tulane, there was a lot they had going for them. Michael Pratt has turned out to be a fantastic quarterback. Can't say enough about Spears as a running back. He is ridiculously fast. And I like his ability to adjust and read holes. He's an intelligent runner, first and foremost, above everything else. I mean, listen, for all the people who are in the UCF fanhood and the Night Nation Twitter mafia for UCF and all that, all the stuff you like about RJ Harvey, Spears has as well, I feel like, you know. So this was definitely something where it was going to be a tough matchup for UCF going into it. But again, I think it's that same place of, if you're questioning JRP's toughness, you're questioning the wrong thing. He relies so much on his speed, does John Rice Plumlee, and I guess technically in the game plan of Gus Malzahn, that a quarterback heading into a game with a head injury has a better chance of performing, at least in terms of football numbers, than a guy with a hamstring injury, you know, that's certain to impact the game versus, you know, possibly having a concussion issue. I mean, and granted, it's a different question. It's about the safety of a player with a head injury and all of that stuff. But in terms of actual pure football running, they were in a better place going into the Tulane game, even though that same shroud of quarterback injury was occurring leading into it.
You know, one nugget of information from that, from what John Rice had to say that I found interesting is that he said that Josh Seliskar had a hamstring injury coming into this game. And if anything, Seliskar, I think, like, aside from Jason Johnson, Seliskar was one of the consistently great defensive players of this season. Like, talk about what you saw at Seliskar in this one.
Boy, I mean, there is no excuse for the size he is for him to get to the outside like he can. And it wouldn't surprise me that he tweaked himself a little bit, you know, in his hamstring, chasing some of these faster cats. I mean, listen, even whether it's Malik Cunningham or any of the other quarterbacks that he's faced, not named Holden Ahlers, there were a lot of mobile guys on UCF's schedule, and be it Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste or Josh Seliskar himself. I mean, the fumble he caused, Bryson, coming from behind the play, he had to come up at least, 10 yards or so to come behind it and force that fumble. Nothing short of the kind of motor you want to see. And I'm not sure how hurt his hamstring would still be at this point in the season. But and I mentioned it with Eric last week. I myself had dealt with that injury myself. It's so difficult of anybody of any caliber, obviously more for somebody who's reliant on running at high speeds like a John Rice Plumlee or a receiver. But even when you're a big guy, you use your legs a lot to get leverage and attack. And that's just a whole other dimension over and above keeping your speed. But what that also says is, depending on how hurt, you know, Josh Seliskar is, what that also speaks to is how intelligent of a pass rusher he is, where he can still make an impact on the game. And we can't tell if he's tweaked in his hamstring. So I don't know enough about when the injury occurred. I don't have that kind of information, nor how bad it may or may not have been. But that shows me how intelligent of a pass rusher that Josh Seliskar is.
I mean, that's the kind of pass rusher you want to have when you go into Big 12. Am I right?
Oh, I mean, listen, you're going to ask me next if I breathe oxygen. We can keep up with the obvious questions, my guy.
Well, Eric is not back yet, folks, but we do have somebody else to come onto the show. He's known by many names, but of course, I just love to call him by his given name, Andrew Glukov. Andrew, I'm guessing that your knee-jerk reactions has been finished, or at least you got into some kind of stopping point with it. So just kind of give us your thoughts and how that's been going.
I just need some pictures.
It just needs some pictures, my man.
Yeah, it just needs some pictures. 1,200 words later. I started making a habit after a few games ago where UCF started having a lot of close games where I was like, I have to start writing some things twice and decide which one goes with, the win or with the loss, just to make my own life a little bit easier. And this was one of them. Started writing win stuff, stopped it, started writing loss stuff, then went back to start writing win stuff, and then finished off the loss stuff.
When will you ever learn?
Well, I'm drowning my sorrows with a little bit of good fuel right here.
That's fair. I mean, listen, I'm the one that was going to travel to the game. What are you complaining about?
Hey, UCF is 20-1 in any game that I have covered in person, but travel was not in the budget, so I did not go to this one.
So Drew, there was one. I don't know if I would say adage, but a piece of advice that always sticks with me whenever I look at football stats, and I'm going to go ahead and bring that up really quickly, is that whenever you see the defensive backs leading the team in tackles, that isn't necessarily a good thing to see. So
I always say it.
First sign indicator. That's right. Well done.
We've been talking about the defense on and off this season, and I mentioned the secondary seemed to be kind of the emphasis of where it was. I mean, we just kind of sang the praise of Josh Seliskar a second ago. The D-line was fine. But for you, what did you see with the defense tonight?
Well, I saw bad angles, a lot of slipping and missed tackles, and a defensive backfield that was at times lining up even softer than soft. There's one thing lining 5-7 yards back, but I mean, there were a couple plays where players were 10 yards back. I mean, it gets to the point. It's like, why are you even there? And you know what? A smart quarterback like Michael Pratt picked it apart. He did an excellent job, very savvy. He struggled a little bit on consistency in the early part of the game. As the game wore on, he actually became more accurate. And UCF was very susceptible to the big play. 4 out of 6 touchdowns on plays over 40 yards. I mean, that's huge. And the thing is, and I read about this in the same fashion of Ohio State, Michigan. A lot of those touchdowns were big plays. Big plays are hard to predict, and they're based on some sort of major malfunction, some sort of major breakdown, a bad angle, a slip, something out of the ordinary that happens. UCF's defense has done better before. I mean, they gave up over 600 yards of offense for the first time since the Boca Raton Bowl in 2020. This is just, Murphy's Law had their way with them. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. However, there is one thing. Well, rule number one, Murphy, is don't mess with Mrs. Murphy. But if there's one positive that can be taken away from this game, is UCF was +3 in turnover margin.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't have that luxury basically the entire season because UCF's defense is very bad in creating turnovers this year. They could not create interceptions, and that largely goes back to how soft they were playing on the coverage. It was like not invested in the market. If you invest in the market, you line up tighter. There's risk, there's reward, and it took Tremont Morris-Brash hitting Michael Pratt, creating a duck that was gift wrapped. It was the only way that the defense was able to create an interception. Other than that, they have not been able to create turnovers most of the year, in the defensive backfield. So you're struggling to begin with. The momentum wasn't there. Everything was going wrong since the Tulane game. Whereas for Tulane, all the momentum was on their side. Everything was working out for them very well. And it just could not get out of its own way between the offensive woes in the first half and the defensive woes the entire game to create enough to ever take a lead, yet alone, hold on to one.
I mean, they had that moment where you get to within 3. I mean, those turnovers, without those turnovers, I think this game would have been an even bigger blowout than it already was.
Yeah, they only got 7 points off turnovers. 3 takeaways and did not get much for it.
No, it was 14 points off. I think they got 2 scores off turnovers.
Not the last time I checked.
Well, I'll throw this out there, Drew, and here's a part I think that's truly the kind of the dagger in all of this. You know, you're sitting back to the point you're making. And you know, I appreciate the validation and you backing my point about sitting back too far. But I mean, at some point, you would have thought the adjustment would be made to start stepping in, locking down on some of this, right?
They've almost exclusively haven't done that. The only times I really saw it was against Cincinnati at the end of the game, and a little bit sparsely here and there. Other than that, they've largely played soft. And you know, if you remember, I put Snuggle Bear up there to represent the pass defense.
All to you, my good friend.
I know that. There were a couple feathers that were ruffled with that, but I stand behind it. This was a patty cake soft pass defense, and they did nothing to change that.
I want to ask you, Drew, because there's been some. I've seen the comments on the Twitterverse and in the chat room earlier on in the show where people were talking about T-Will and that this is all T-Will's fault, but you're talking about kind of the soft coverage in the secondary, and I put forth the argument that this isn't necessarily as much on T-Will as it is on co-defensive coordinator and secondary coach David Gibbs. So I just want to kind of what your thoughts are on as far as Travis Williams' role in all this.
Well, I think it's both. In the end, ultimately it flows up to the head coach. The buck stops there, but you have to go down the chain of command. You know, Travis Williams, the defense is, the product of the defense. He may be a co-defensive coordinator, but he's the main guy. In the end, it falls to him. When the defense fails, he has to answer for it. David Gibbs, he handles the secondary, who have been much maligned all year, as we established for good reason. They've got to answer for that, and there's accountability. Could there be a job, loss here? Possibly. This was a very talented defensive backfield that woefully underperformed because of scheme. It wasn't for talent. A bad scheme will negate any possible talent that you have. And I think this took away from what UCF was able to bring to the table player-wise.
Let me play a little devil's advocate on that, though, Drew, because I like the point you're making about scheme. I see where you're coming from on that. I believe I've made a similar point at other times throughout the year. But with this particular instance, too, I'm wondering how much of it is a veteran coach in Willie Fritz taking advantage of a rematch versus a younger coach in T-Will and this group that's on UCF's coaching staff. Do you think there's an element there?
Well, one game a season does not make.
Correct.
This has been a systemic problem all season long, which is where I think the real issue is. Now,
sure. Let me question better.
They got torched this game, no doubt about it. But I don't think this one game is going to be where it comes.
Sure. No. Fair point. Let me rephrase the question a little bit better. How much of it do you feel like is Willie Fritz taking advantage of what he saw in the first game and making the adjustments to pencil whip in this game?
Plenty. Anytime you have a second chance at an opponent, you've got to change things up, and that's one thing that UCF didn't do much of any. We understand with John Rice Plumlee being having a bum leg, he looked sluggish. He lacked the explosiveness that he's been known for. The defense for Tulane sold out on the run. They dared him to throw. They dare Tommy Castellanos to throw. And at least for the first half, neither could until, they were able to kind of reset things in the second half, and Plumlee came back in and kind of redefined himself as a player. He sat in the pocket. He stopped doing the run first thing. He actually settled down a little bit. It wasn't until the offensive line really started breaking down late in the game that he started trying to run, and it just wasn't working. He just didn't have the explosiveness. No, Willie Fritz is a veteran coach. He knows what he's doing. And I've said it before, the Tulane Fighting Fritzes has always been a very scrappy bunch, much like Willie Fritz. Look at the issues that they had to conquer last year going into this year. All I can think back was in 2005, Tulane is out of, has no home because of Hurricane Katrina, and they have to come to Orlando and play at UCF. I remember that game very well. Being in New Orleans, having to deal with weather-based adversity seems to be like the calling card of the school. But Willie Fritz just has instilled a scrappiness that a player like Michael Pratt just personifies. You'd be hard-pressed to find a scrappier player than Michael Pratt. He's not the most physically talented guy on the field, but boy, is he cerebral, and he knows how to pick you apart.
I remember back in like the 2019 season, because that was the time before, because I was much more inclined to be at the stadium as a fan before the pandemic hit. But I remember distinctly in 2019 when UCF played Tulane, and I remember seeing this QB. Michael Pratt was a freshman. That I remember seeing him because I distinctly remember him being a freshman, and he gave UCF a run for their money. UCF still won the game, but Tulane gave him a run for their money, and I credited that to Michael Pratt. And to see the QB that he developed into, it's like, yeah, I was right to point him out. And it's like, he's going to be a problem, and he ended up being that way. You mentioned Thomas Castellanos earlier, by the way, Drew. Trace Troco, friend of the show from Sons of UCF, actually has a video where Gus Malzahn talks about that QB decision and bringing JRP back into the game. So let's hear from Gus Malzahn real quick on that matter.
Conversation earlier in the week, and so Thomas got the reps of practice, Rice. That's the way we went about it.
So Rice, how tough was it to play in this game? You went out, and you came back in. How tough was that?
Not tough. I mean, you work all year to be able to play in a game like this, and I don't think it's not hard to play. It's something that you want to do. You work, and this team has worked to get to this point, and so I didn't want to sell myself short or sell this team short.
Coach, what was your thinking in bringing John Rice back in after Thomas was in the game?
Yeah, I just, we put, Thomas was in a tough spot, but he did some really good things. John Rice just kept telling the coach, hey, give me another chance, I'll operate. May not be able to run as good, but operating. So put him back in, and, he really gave us a spark and a shot in the arm. And like I said, when it was 31-28, I mean, we had the momentum right there, and it was a good ball game.
How much work did Thomas get during the week?
Yeah, he got all the number 2 reps right there. And like I said, Thomas is going to be a phenomenal player. And just the fact that he was able to do what he did, I was real impressed at the time. We just felt like their defense is so good. We needed our quarterback to be a little bit of a run threat right there. And then, John Rice with his hamstring, and he's such a tough individual. And, so that was good.
What were the conversations like with Thomas? Because this, burdens his red shirt. But did he come to you, or was he willing to play? What were his conversations like?
He wants to play, and he'll help us. We'll do some things in the ball game and try to make it worth his while. But the fact that he was ready to go, like I said, he's a real special one.
And that was Gus Malzahn. Drew, Kyle, what were your thoughts on what he had to say? I am intrigued to see that he mentioned the bowl game and trying to work Castellanos into that and burning this red shirt worth it for him.
I mean, at the very least, and you'll hear this come up, especially as you see any coverage anybody's doing on bowl games. It's something I've seen basically every bowl game I've covered here in Orlando, which, I mean, the 3 games, in their form now, right? The Cure Bowl, the Cheez-It Bowl, and the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, right? Like all of those. I know it's funny, Drew. Just I have to call it that. It's accurate. Dang it. But I say all that to say every coach, all 6 coaches in those 3 games will talk about the value of the extra practice and the extra development of players going into those games, especially since we live in a world now where it's commonplace for cats headed into the NFL, like potentially an Isaiah Bowser. I'm not saying I know that for a fact it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did. That's why I use him as an example, where guys who are behind players that are starters throughout the season now get their real quality reps in full game situations where it's all on the line and it could be a big deal. The coaches are trying hard to win this game over and above the normal level, right? Because these are all recruiting outings, get a lot of big TV, but a lot of big exposure, a real way to make a big splash to close out games. And this is the kind of situation where they get those extra reps where teams that don't necessarily get the advantage of those big bowl games, they're done for the year. They don't get that extra exposure and opportunity to work on their craft, right? So I think the bowl game is a big part of Castellanos' emergence, into the starting lineup. Now, granted, I, like many fans, probably would have enjoyed more than 8 attempts, but that being said, maybe he wasn't making enough impact to earn those extra reps beyond the 8 throws he got this game.
Well, let me add something to that. It's not just the reps at the game; it's the practices.
Sure.
You get those extra practices for qualifying for a bowl game, right. and it's one reason why the later the bowl game, the better it off is for you.
Right.
You get more out of it, and where people are throwing around bowl games. Oh, I want to stay in state, and to which I say a big fat no. Big, you could my no couldn't be more emphatic of why you do not want to stay in the state of Florida.
Do your Dr. Evil, Drew. How about you?
Well, not for 2 years in a row, anyway.
2 years in a row. Try 4 years in a row.
No, well, I mean, also let me throw the devil's advocate of that, and then you can shoot it down because I know you love killing my arguments when you can try to, Drew.
Oh man, it's like a national pastime.
Yeah, albeit how often you fail at doing it.
Also a national pastime.
No, but joking aside, I can make the fiscal argument if I'm Terry Mohajir of the fiscal impact of going out of state and doing all that, and where I can just stay in state, go to a stadium, which is already mine anyway. If it happens to be Raymond James and the Gasparilla, so be it. I know the Gasparilla is all about that life. What is it? 4 out of the top 5 attended Gasparilla Bowls are UCF participated, right? All that stuff working for the event in question. What's the downside for UCF? I know the answer, but tell them.
Well, there's multiple downsides. One, it's when the game is played. It's pre-Christmas. A pre-Christmas bowl is basically an insult. That's the consolation prize of, well, at least you tried. Boca Raton, right? Gasparilla, all pre-Christmas, all should be a hard no. I've been saying that the Military Bowl should be the target, and based on UCF's talent, last year was an exception because the story sold itself so well. I mean, Florida just kind of fell in their lap as a team that barely got bowl eligible. Okay,
and both sides weren't injured as anyone, right?
You got the in-state, thing there. You're not going to have that this year. So it's going to be, 9-win UCF against either some G5 school, which then becomes a case of punching down, or some 6-6 Power 5, which also becomes, something really unimpressive. You're better off at that point going for more of a mid-level bowl game, such as the Military, where you'll play either like a Duke or a Wake Forest. While it doesn't sound great, I'll take that over Podunk U in the Gasparilla Bowl.
Well, speaking of the bowl game, Gus Malzahn actually had some comments, and the players had some comments to make on the bowl game for them. So let's go ahead and hear what Gus Malzahn and the players had to say on that as a bit of a extension of our discussion about a potential bowl.
I guess it's just like the personnel that we were in that caught us in personnel that best fit their play. And they had big plays off of that. But to me, it's like we tried, played our best. We made a lot of mistakes, missed a lot of tackles. That's all we did.
Gus, were you surprised over here to your left, sir? Were you surprised that they could make that many big plays in the passing game? Did that kind of shock you a little bit?
Yeah, we've done a really good job keeping explosive pass plays. Really the last 2 years, and it's probably as many as we've had maybe combined. Give them credit. They played really, really good in the biggest game. So the big plays were, a huge part of the game.
Gus, what's next for this team? You mentioned the bowl game, but transfer portal opens on next week. And what's next for this team?
What's next is a bowl game. To win that bowl game, get some momentum for next year. you look at, last year we won a big bowl game. This year we made it to the conference championship. I mean, we're going in the right direction as a program. These three guys, the rest of the leaders have a whole lot to do with that. We're disappointed right now, but the future is really bright for our program.
Do you need a bowl win to consider this a successful season?
I mean, bowl, it's been, I'll say this. I mean, bowl games are very important. Okay, just like it was last year. So we'll put everything we can into getting a bowl victory.
Final question.
And that was Gus Malzahn. He also commented a little bit on the big playability there. But let's start with kind of what he had about the bowl game conversation. Kyle, Drew.
Bowl game's your house. Go ahead.
You both started at the same time.
I'll defer.
Did somebody say bowl games?
Uh-oh.
Hey! The press conference finally ended.
Represent our team mascot, Ebenezer Scrooge himself. It's Eric Lopez.
Hey,
Welcome back.
Yeah, we'll get to volleyball later, Bryce. It was interesting post, emotional as you would imagine. But no, I'm curious. Obviously, while I was doing that, the bowl game. That's the big question here, Drew. Where are we going?
Well, I'm still pretty convinced that it's going to be the Military Bowl. UCF's had a good season, and it's not like a case where you have that Gasparilla story that sells itself, and otherwise you're punching down. And UCF moving on to the Big 12 really can't afford to punch down, because this could be the last time for at least a couple of years that UCF could have a double-digit win season. Let's be honest. There's going to be some growing pains, and expectations are going to have to be tempered going into the Big 12. It's not like you're going to have all these temples on the schedule that you can use to prop things up. So I'd like to see them go against the ACC, a Duke, an NC State or a Wake Forest in the Military Bowl. I think it's the best spot for them.
Well, Drew, let me ask this question this way, and I kind of have my thoughts on it, but between you and Elo,
not the First Responders Bowl, Kyle.
I didn't bring it up, but now that you know, I'm kidding.
You were thinking it.
Listen, get out of my thoughts, Drew. I know we know each other for a long time, but that doesn't help our viewers right now, buddy. No, but honestly, kind of for those who are listening, kind of frame what the value of an ACC win would be. Like, listen, I know you mentioned the First Responder Bowl prediction. Obviously, it's not possible because Cristobal was not as successful as a lot of people would have thought at Miami. Didn't even end up being bowl eligible. But what would an ACC bowl victory do for their stock out there in the college football world?
Well, it gives them a chance to kind of point towards those other state schools from that conference and be like, haha, game on, because it's a new era. UCF's going to be at the big boy table. They're going to be one of them. So it's an opportunity. You win against an ACC opponent when Miami is down. You can use that as a selling point of say, hey, we beat the guys that they couldn't beat. It makes for a selling point, especially when you're going from transition of a group of five to a power five. The ACC is a known conference, and their members are very well known in the state of Florida. Big 12, not as much. So, Florida State and Miami, that everyone knows Florida State and Miami intimately, in the state of Florida. So you want that. You had the University of Florida last year, beating the Gators. This becomes an opportunity to indirectly point at Miami and say, hey, look at these irrelevant fools.
That's one way to put it.
Well, let me just, obviously I've been at a presser, so I'm just kind of curious. Has there been any talk, buzz on social media? What's the likely scenario? I know you caught the end of that post-game presser, so I apologize. Drew, have there been any buzz since the game where they could be headed? I agree, for the record. Remember when they played Marshall? Nobody does. You know why? Because nobody cared. Nobody cared that they played Marshall and Gasparilla.
Hey, I remember because I was there. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I was there too, and that spawned me end up joining the Banneret.
Well, something positive came out of that bowl game then.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Trey Strelko challenged me. He goes, the American has no rivalries. And I go, oh, I can write an article. I can get you 10 rivalries. And he's like, all right, do it. And that was the first article I wrote for Black and Gold Banneret.
Thank you, Trace. Trace is probably in Bourbon Street right now.
I bet somewhere you put Memphis and UCF, damn it. Anyway.
Mike Oresco did. Mike Oresco, as we learned this week.
Twice.
Right? Yeah. Right.
I had a number of things. What I did not have was UCF Cincinnati, which I don't think was a top 10 one, despite the football picking up an elevation. It really didn't exist anywhere else. However, Memphis had a football side, had a basketball side that were both very one-sided. You smushed them together, and you had a lot of parity, and that made for a very interesting rivalry.
So here's a question that I'd like to posit for you, gentlemen. And I want to ask, what do you think that this game does for this team going into the bowl game? Because you're coming off of what really is in a way a heartbreaking loss, because you had a little bit, you looked like you kind of had a momentum going, and then you lost it, you know? So what do you think this game does for going into the bowl game?
You know, I'll throw out the optimistic version here, and then I'll let Drew crap all over it.
I roll.
Yeah, right. For my money, you know, granted, last year there were a lot more injuries for UCF, you know, at the conclusion of the season after the final game, where they did end up beating USF late as well. Granted, nothing like the holy holler by any stretch of the imagination, but nonetheless a victory. But I say all that to say this, guys. I feel like the concept of John Rice Plumlee's hamstring getting as much time to heal as possible. Listen, to your point, Drew, a pre-Christmas bowl game is just that many more days that John Rice Plumlee is off of his hamstring, right? And in my mind, I think he's one of the players that doesn't, you know, opt out of the bowl game in question. Again, I mentioned Isaiah Bowser, but for all intents and purposes, I think he might be about the only guy offensively that opts to do that. Granted, it'll be dependent on which guys are, you know, planning to hit the transfer portal. But I'll add this as a positive too for the portal as well. For those guys that are trying to get film for people to look at their future destination coming out of the portal, now they have a big game to make a resume out of for a different program to pick them up and possibly scholarship them. So from that standpoint, they have those things working for them. John Rice Plumlee may be certainly at the very least will be a lot closer to the runner he was throughout the season compared to what he was tonight here in the championship loss to Tulane. And I think they have all of that working for them heading into the bowl game. So, I mean, as far as the question as you pose it, Bryson, I think it's a situation where whoever it is that they challenge, be it the Dukes or the Wake Forests of the world or whatever ACC team it is, they might have the possibility of underestimating what John Rice Plumlee can do because they may not know the status of his running ability and get a couple touchdowns out of it. Who knows?
All right, Drew, go ahead and criticize him.
Well, you know, rest is always the best solution to any injury, and obviously, the more time you can add, the better off. So, I mean, in that fashion, it sells itself.
Right.
You know, the other thing is, you know, you want stature, and we all know that the earlier the bowl is, the less status it carries, and you want to build on that notoriety. You want to build on brand and reputation going into the new conference. So. What better way than to upstage the other schools that are coming into the conference by playing against a better team and winning the game? I mean, you know, beating Marshall in the 2019 Gasparilla Bowl isn't going to have the same value as beating a Duke in the Military Bowl this year. You know, while UCF's financial situation is covered. You know, it's satisfied. Nothing's changing. The contracts are agreed upon, and you know this game's not going to change that. You know what? At that point, it's like, hey, we know we're going to be in a good spot. Let's aim for as high as we can go. This isn't like last year where you know situation was different. It wasn't like 2 years ago where it was COVID. You didn't want to really leave because you were kind of afraid what was going on, and it wasn't like 2019 where there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Well. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. They can take a short-term hit to get a better game and just enjoy it. Remember, the bowl games are also about the players and their experiences. They've never been to a bowl game in Annapolis. I mean, that's a new experience that I think they would enjoy. So we got to remember and keep that in mind as well.
I don't know, heading that close to the Naval Academy, is that an enjoyable experience for this group?
Actually, I've heard good things about that area, actually.
They're not playing them. They're not playing.
Right, they're not playing Navy. We're fine. Well, B isn't me to create little stir-ups, an argument here, God forbid.
You?
But me, I would never do such a thing. I would make sure during these practices that Thomas Castellanos gets some reps. I think he's going to be better off for getting this experience. Get him to develop. You got to develop this young man. And I just don't believe, guys, that sitting on the bench, you get better. I think taking practice, and now that I think we would agree, Mikey King probably will not be on this roster by bowl game time.
I think that's pretty much a given at this point.
So let's give this young man some reps. Give him
he's
some
going
reps.
He's going to get reps. And here's the thing.
Ron said in the post-game presser that he would.
Good.
And this is a bit of a misunderstanding. He gets reps. He gets to practice. He does this. There's a reason why he's the third guy on the depth chart. It's because of what you saw today. The game is still too quick for him. It takes time. You don't have, it's rare that you find a guy like a Dylan Gabriel who catches onto it immediately, or Mikey Keene who about halfway through the season the light bulb went off and things just start slowing down. It takes time, and most freshmen do not get that light bulb off in that first season.
Mm-hmm.
He looked very uncomfortable out there. He had no rhythm internally, yet alone externally. He looked like a guy who really didn't belong out there. And that's not a dig on him. This is a common thing with freshman quarterbacks. There's a lot to take in. This is not high school talent. Even in practice, they see this stuff. This isn't a vacuum. They didn't walk out there like, oh yeah, let's just see how he does. If they didn't have to play them, they wouldn't have. They did it out of necessity, not because they wanted what he do.
And I don't know, Drew, if you commented earlier, perhaps Gus panicked in going to him when maybe he should have just stuck with JRP and just adapted with JRP's limitations. I thought JRP looked good in the pocket under the circumstances when considering the line didn't help him at all. I thought JRP was, and I'm not, again, I would just give both JRP and give Thomas some reps, develop these guys, because you're playing for next year now. You're playing for the Big 12, and you got to make sure you play. I would play Townsend. I'm playing the young guys. Make sure they get the reps. Take advantage of all these extra practice. How many times do we, Kyle and Drew, you've been at pressers. What is the one thing coaches always bring up first when they talk about a bowl game? All the extra practice.
Correct. Yeah, we touched on that earlier too, Elo. Yeah. All 6 coaches at the 3 Orlando Bowl games, when I talked to them, all mentioned the extra practice and the opportunity for playing. And you're nailing it that Castellanos will see that time over and above his non-bowl participant counterparts, 100%.
I had one gentleman talk to me on we were talking on Twitter, and he was bringing up Mackenzie Milton and how he played on the field and developed. Well, let's be honest, his mechanics were not good the first year. Eric, you saw it very front and center like I did. His mechanics were terrible, and needed a lot of work from that first year to second. You pushed the ball big time.
People forget this now. People forget this because we look back. Well, that I was there in the Cure Bowl, but people forget this. He was going to redshirt. And what happened was Holman got hurt in the Michigan game, hurt his hamstring. Now, remember, back then, you didn't have the 4-game red shirt. And Scott Frost and his staff decided it was either, we got to either go with this kid or we're going to go with, I think it was Nick Patty at the time, which was not good. He came in relief in that Michigan game in 2016. I think they decided, screw it. We're going to throw him out there and let him learn on the fly. Because, you know what? But the difference was they were coming off a winless season. So you were going.
Low. This was a 6-7 team. This was not a team playing for a conference championship.
Right. And I think Scott knew no matter what, we're going to stick with this kid. And remember, people forget this. I remember after the Tulsa game and the bowl game, as you mentioned, Drew, a lot of people were saying McKenzie should be benched. And to Scott Frost's credit, he always said, this kid's going to win a lot of games for us. He's the answer. He was proven correct about a lot of that. So, but you're right. McKenzie was definitely, I think if you asked all of those people, they were not ready at that time. That was out of necessity and it's kind of similar here. I hope, like I said, I hope this is a positive in the long run for Thomas to learn from this experience. He's a young man. The future's still ahead of him. Let's get him some reps, practice, and learn from this. And I'm not opposed if they both play in the bowl game now, especially since the red shirt's gone. You might as well get him as much experience to learn, because I don't think the bowl game result should hinder your plans as far as developing him now.
And that's what'll happen.
Bowl games are exhibition games.
Exactly.
So that's a good opportunity to kind of put them out there. The real mission is win a conference championship. That's always the mission of any year. So it's like, this was like, if you picked one game to not put him out, this was the one. Like, this is the one you did. And I viewed it as kind of like a Stephen Moffat moment where
I remember this. Yeah.
Nothing good came from it. Because here's the truth. Nothing good came from Castellanos' time on the field. Really didn't.
No, I agree. 100%. In retrospect, you're right. He should have just stayed with Jeremy. Let's explain the Stephen Moffat for the younger audience, because there's a lot of Knight fans that were not around back then, especially Bryson. Bryson wasn't even born back then.
That was Bryson even born. He was born like 10 years ago or something like that.
So I don't know. Yeah.
What year was this?
2003.
2003, I would have been 2 or 3 years old at that point.
I don't think you were
really know what's going on.
Clearly, you were following Mike Kruzak's departure at that time.
Yeah.
Ryan Schneider had just gotten kicked off the school.
For falsifying attendance forms.
Which is why he'll never be in the Hall of Fame, Bryson, all right, when we bring this up. Even though he was a great quarterback, top 5 quarterback program history, better than Dylan Gabriel. But that was Mike Kruzak. Unfortunately, he was under fire, and that was a coach that was desperate, and that was his last move. And it was like, we're just going to throw Stephen Moffat in there. And everybody's like, oh, no.
And that's exactly what happened. It was an oh, no moment. Because
I remember I was in the stands for that. There was a lot of oh, no.
Yeah, no,
this is the start of that 17-game losing streak. I mean, it was bad because before that, it was Brandon Sumner was the quarterback. He actually, I think, won the last game.
Wasn't there a Garcia in there, thrown in there?
I don't know about Garcia, but there was John. There was John Rivera.
Yeah, John Rivera. That's what I'm thinking.
But I think Sumner was the last one out there, and then they threw Moffat out there for like the last 4 games, and this was the old redshirt system where
in the MAC days.
This was the MAC days. Those were dark days, but you only were allowed to play like 3 or 4 quarters within the first 3 or 4 games. And that was it. That was your redshirt time. So by then, of course, the redshirt window was long closed. So they pulled the red shirt. They sent him out there. He was terrible. I mean, he was way out of his element. It was way above him.
Now, there's a happy ending to some extent. Moffat 2 years later led UCF to the Hawaii Bowl in 2005, had a good year, and then lost his job to Kyle Israel when there was a back and forth drama. One thing UCF is good at is quarterback drama, folks. We got history of it with Israel and Moffat, Bortles, Gottfried. I mean, this year will be defined by the quarterback, guys, right?
That happens all over the place. I mean, you get that. The quarterback is.
I feel like it's great. I feel it's wackier over here, though. I feel like it's wackier.
It's because you're paying attention to it.
Well, look, I wanted to bring this up real quickly because Kyle mentioned Isaiah Bowser earlier, and I want to be able to take a step back on this because we're talking about these little minutia of the quarterback controversy, whatever, because these are still, college kids that just went through a tough loss in a conference championship game. And they were actually asked about that in the press conference, both Malzahn and Isaiah Bowser. So I want to go ahead and just play that clip for you all to hear what they have to say as far as their mindset after a loss like this.
For getting us here, proud of them for fighting back. We didn't get off to a great start. The crowd was phenomenal here, but they kept fighting, and we'll have a bowl game and end with a good season.
Josh, can you talk about that big defensive stop where you're going to strip the ball and get the turnover right when Tulane was on the verge of scoring? That could have been, that was a huge play to get back in it. Just talking about what you saw and the effort, how the defense, didn't let down.
On that stop, I just felt like I read the play, and then I just hustled to the ball and made a big play. The defense played great today, not to our standard, but we played the best game we could. Some stuff you just can't change. We made mistakes. We tried to play our best, but it is what it is.
Isaiah, what are the emotions you come back and you find that the team gets into this American Athletic Conference Championship? The goals are within reach. What are you feeling right now?
It hurts for sure. A lot of work put in to get to this point, and especially about the game. Got the momentum coming back, and we're happy to get it done. So definitely hurts right now.
John Rice, just what do you take away from a game like this? Obviously, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears out there today. But
yeah, like Bowser said, it hurts. Rips your heart out, Yeah, it hurts. It's one of those things that if it doesn't hurt, then this doesn't mean nothing to you. You know what I mean? Like you said, blood, sweat, and tears went through this season to get to this point. It hurts.
I'll tell you what, gentlemen, if there's one thing if there's anything that I love to talk about the John Rice Plumlee that hasn't been brought up yet, is that he is really great in press conferences, and that little line about how if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't mean nothing to you. I think that really kind of establishes, I think, the whole mood of the UCF fan base tonight. Wouldn't you say?
No, that's fair. I mean, listen, and John Rice has been his own particular form of hero on the microphone, win or lose, and I feel like, well, there was I'm going to struggle to remember which game it was. I feel like it was the Louisville game. Somebody asked him, "So, what do you think of your performance tonight?" And he said without hesitation, "Bad." And then he broke down why he thought it was bad. So, I feel like, John Rice has always been a guy that's forthright in press conferences and not, said as much as he can say without getting in trouble for it, so to speak, right? But I'll put it this way, him and Bowser both, do a good job answering questions to the best of their ability and all that. But I don't really think you're going to start hearing about who's going to be playing and who's going to be opting out for bowl games until, certainly in the very least, until after they're named, for one. And then leading into that, I think we're still a couple of weeks out from hearing any official word. And again, like, the reason why I speculate on Isaiah Bowser is simply how much we've heard from Coach Malzahn about his NFL aspirations and how he feels like he's an NFL running back and all that sort of thing. And Bowser late last year alluded to the same, at least loosely about his, hopes to become a running back at the next level. And who knows, with the XFL coming into play here in Orlando, perhaps he'll be a member of that team as well. There's no idea, on where that'll go. But if we're reading the tea leaves on Mikey Keene the way that we are, we would be remiss to assume Isaiah Bowser is going to play in the bowl game. And I could be completely wrong. Maybe
I think you're dead on. I think you're dead on. I think you're going to have some guys. I mean, this is the new norm now, is some guys are going to skip bowl games either to declare for the NFL draft. You're going to have some guys that are being the portal. I mean, it's just, that's the new world that we're in college athletics here. And especially as a running back, you only have a certain shelf life.
Correct.
As a running back.
I believe December 5th is the day that the transfer portal opens, though, right? So if anything, I think it was Kyle that mentioned that the bowl game can give you an opportunity to show some film off to potential destinations, and so if you're maybe thinking of that camp, then I think maybe you wait until after the bowl game to potentially do that. Though one question that UCF Realist brought up is, why would someone who announced their intent to transfer be allowed to play in a bowl game?
Because he's not in the portal.
Yeah, he's not in the portal. A, B, if the program can listen, there's a possibility.
We saw that with Florida a little bit last year.
That's not true, though. That's not true. They didn't have a player in the portal. They talked about joining the portal, like Kamari Gamble. Didn't join the portal until January. Emory Jones didn't go in the portal until March. They can talk about it all you want, but until you actually
that's true. That's true.
Through compliance.
I hear what you're
you're still part of the program. Once you enter in the portal, you're out of the program. You're gone.
But
they don't have to bring you back if you want to come back.
Well, it's still, I think the question, and this isn't to say that your point is not well made, Drew, but I think the question still holds true there. What's the motivation for the program to still let you play in that instance? And in the case of Emory Jones in particular, if the program and the player can get a win and a good performance, both entities are made better, right? So if Florida.
Well, and remember, Richardson was out with an injury
Now you do it again, Elo. There you go. At Florida at the time, their depth was the issue. They had to have somebody.
Right. No, so I think that plays a big factor whether you let a kid play or not.
But let's say, Ryan O'Keefe is somebody that's been talked about in rumors. If he can get good film and UCF is also well served towards the aspect of winning a bowl game. If it's a win-win scenario, why wouldn't that happen? It's one of these things I feel like that. Listen, we live in a world where players are business entities now with the NIL and the transfer portal. These agreements can be struck and that sort of situation can occur. It's a good question to be asked, and I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis.
Well, it could the matchup also play a factor? If you're playing a MAC school, a player might say, that's a waste of my time. Whereas
maybe the program wouldn't need him either.
Correct.
Ways, but.
Correct. So a lot of factors. Drew, I don't know. You could kind of finish that thought before we move on.
It comes down to the fact of, are you in or are you not? In the case of Emory Jones, he said he was going to, but he actually never did it. And that's the thing. That's the big key. That's why he was still there. And once you go in the portal, you're out of the program. You've left. Like, look at Brandon Mahan in basketball. He went into the portal. He was gone. And when he decided he wanted to come back to school, the program had to say, yes, you can come back. They're under no obligation to let you come back because you've left. It's like, you quit a job. You're kind of in between jobs and you're like, hey, I want my job back. Well, there may not be a job back, waiting for you.
Yeah.
Or they could say, yeah, you can come back. But once you leave, you leave. And, a lot of players say they're going to do something, but until they formally do it, which we actually don't really have access. We don't have access to that. We can't see inside the portal. We have to look at others to be able to tell us that. So, like, we heard the thing about Andrew Osteen going into the portal. Well, it was reported that he was going. There was nothing that actually backed it up. But as we know, they've started new windows on the portal. So obviously he's planning on it. He hasn't gone yet because there's no benefit. It's not open yet. All you can do is just stop playing. And there was no benefit for him to stop playing. He has no red shirt in the situation. He's played way too much. So he's going to be using it as a grad transfer next year. So it really depends on the players and their situations. Michael Keene holding on to his red shirt, not playing. Andrew Osteen has no red shirts in this situation, is playing. But at the end of the day, it's not until Monday, which is the date after Selection Sunday, when all the bowl games are announced, that the portal opens up. So once those bowl, as to Kyle's point, bowl games will be announced before the transfer portal opens.
Yeah. All right. We got plenty of time between now and then with the podcast and our site to kind of break all that down. I really don't want to dwell on that too much. Plus, both of you have families, and unlike me and Bryson, well, Bryson has a family, but I want to get you two kind of out of here because you both have been awesome and got to get going. Kyle's got to get ready to watch his 49ers pummel my Dolphins on Sunday, and Drew's got to.
I'll be watching men's basketball.
Oh, it's basketball season officially. Young team against Stanford on Sunday. There.
Well,
yeah,
Michigan is actually only 1 point on Purdue, 14-13 right
Michigan's in the play. We got Nick Saban right now at halftime politicking on Kyle's behalf and why he should be in the playoff over Ohio State and TCU. I mean, give me a break.
Sorry, Alabama. There's a reason why the picker says you have very little chance.
But we also have sources. We also have sources telling Brett McMurphy that Golesh is accepting the USF job.
Of course he is. Well, who else would? What else? What other head coaching job is he going to get? Congrats to that, South Florida. Enjoy that.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Deion Sanders.
Or John Gruden.
Yeah. All right.
Or Jamie Chadwell.
Oh, man. All right. I'm going to give you both the last thoughts here before we let you go. Me and Bryson have some business to take care of still before we wrap up this show. But, Drew, I don't know if you have your knee-jerk done, or if not, you could promote it, tease it, and your thoughts. Say that again?
I'm literally adding pictures.
Beautiful. Give us a tease.
Well, here's the truth. I kind of put it out here before. Thomas Castellanos was not ready to be out there. He looked pretty lost, and the team suffered for it. This was a defense that really just fell apart. The pass coverage, absolutely horrendous. Been a systemic problem all year, but it's time to look forward. There's a bowl game coming up. We're going to see some players leave the program as expected. Mikey Keene is definitely the guy I have circled as the most well-known guy expected to leave the program. And it's about looking forward. This was the last game in UCF's American Athletic Conference tenure. Much like their time in the MAC and Conference USA, they have lost the final conference game that they've played, moving on to bigger and better things.
Great run in the American, by the way. Awesome. This was a blast. This was a great. I mean, I know people, whatever. This was a great era to be in the American. I think the league has helped UCF. UCF's helped the American. I think this has been a great relationship overall. And so, but trust me, I'm going to miss cities like New Orleans and Memphis and Houston when we traded for frickin' Stillwater and Lubbock. God!
Did you say New Orleans?
Haven't they?
Wait. Did you say New Orleans?
This is what he does, man. The fourth.
That's what I do. I'm mocking it. I love that city. I'm going to miss it because instead I'm going to go to Manhattan, Kansas instead over the years.
Come on, it's the Little Apple. I mean, nothing says big time like Lubbock.
Yeah, give me a break. Yeah. At least we got Fort Worth. We got Fort Worth.
Hey, I got family that lives in the Dallas Metroplex, so that I got a chance to go to Fort Worth and TCU Stadium and stuff, Ammon Carter Stadium. I would love to go check out an actual game there. I'm looking forward to our.
I think that's the #1 destination for. I mean, not counting Oklahoma, Texas, because that's unique in its own category for the next year or two. But I think of the remaining schools, I think TCU is probably the #1 destination for football as far as traveling is concerned. Yeah, I agree.
It was a lot of fun to go there. If you ever go to Fort Worth, go check out the Stampede there. Really cool. Yeah, they've got a parade where they bring out cattle into the streets.
Kyle's face is saying it all.
You're tourist. Shut up.
Go ahead, Kyle. I feel like you can tell it. You can see in your face. You just.
Hey. I'm going to change it so that it's something that he will appreciate. Now you go back to the Dallas side. You go to Frisco, Texas, home of the National Video Game Museum. That's for you, Kyle.
Listen, far be it from me to critique my Buckeye fan and his role in the Texas Chamber of Commerce, but nonetheless, listen, at the end of the day, I know there's been a lot of conversation with Mikey Keene and what's going on. Fans can say whatever they want. At the end of the day, he's made a place in UCF history. There's nothing that fans can do about it if they don't like what Mikey Keene's doing, because here's the fact of the matter. He is the quarterback that threw the holy holler and assured that USF would be a loser permanently in the series, because had that game not been won, it would have been tied, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day. I love the Ace Ventura.
Well, and this is part of new college. This is the new college athletics landscape. So we just have to adapt to it and accept it. I mean,
I'll put it this way, Eric. Though he won't need NIL to get drinks bought for him here in Orlando. That's all I'm saying.
And you're going to be at basketball Sunday.
I am. I will be there representing the Black and Gold Banneret. So check out the Twitter account during there where you'll see my.
So you might find out before all of us where we're going bowl wise, because there'll be a lot of chatter around that building about what bowl game. Who knows? I mean,
it has happened in the past where I am sitting next to our good friends Trace Trilco and Jason. Jason.
I don't think Trace will be there.
Oh yeah, they may still be. Yeah, actually, they may.
Yeah, they're gonna. You might have it all to yourself.
Maybe I will be sitting next to them. Maybe I'll be next to my good friend Matt Murchell from the Orlando.
He's gonna be giving himself some much needed therapy.
Listen. But that all being said, always fun. And we lost Eric. Okay, well that's fun. With all that in mind, listen, I understand the fans that find a disappointment in not winning the championship. But again, we still got further as a team than they did last year, and there's plenty to be said for that. I'm personally anxious to see where they end up. We'll see if Drew's 100% correct about the Military Bowl. I think that's a strong take. But if in fact it is the First Responder Bowl, understand I will make fun of you, Drew.
It's not going to be the first.
It won't. That's the joke. Shut up. No.
I have a question for the two of you, because Eric mentioned that this has been a fine era in the American for UCF, but I mean UCF's been in the American since the American has technically been a thing. Thinking about this, UCF. We ended up in the American only because of the controversy with the Big East happened. Now looking back at all of that, how do you kind of view that event in context to the program's progress to this point?
the appropriate stepping stone, right, Drew? I mean, this is the springboard upon which UCF enters into the Power Five, which was the goal, right?
So it's been the goal since the 90s. I mean, when Steve Sloan was sending, videos to the Big East and ACC begging, please take us. We thought UCF made it to the promised land in 2011, December 2011, when UCF got the invite to the Big East. And then, the whole thing just fell apart. And what became a have system then became the have not. So to finally be in a situation where they become part of the haves and it's not going away is quite the moment. And, July 1st, I think we'll be able to drink it up a little bit more because we still got, the winter sports and the spring sports to go through. But once July 1st happens, they officially switch affiliations. I think it'll finally start to handle like we made it.
Yeah, no, you mentioned that point about the Big East, and of course the Fiesta Bowl happens in football, and that's a whole thing, for when Baylor gets knocked off and RG3 becomes, albeit a short time, a sensation in the NFL shortly thereafter. Then, the dip in 2015 happens only for what happened in 2017 to happen, right? And that's where Danny White does the now somewhat notorious, one could say in the college football realm, 17-0, or not 17-0, but national champs after the Peach Bowl win, right? And that is the other step leading into what is this ascension into the Power Five. So, I mean, we're a number of athletic directors thereafter, Drew, a number of coaches there later. But, I mean, this was the trajectory of a program. And listen, there are few that have done it at this speed.
I'd say there's none that have done it at this speed. Let's make it a little more unique because it's true. I mean, the closest thing you had never quite formulated, which was Boise State's rise. They came FBS around the same time that UCF did. However, UCF is a spring chicken as far as school age compared to all these other cats out there. A lot of these schools. Someone asked me about about Cincinnati's relationship to Ohio State, and I said, well, they played last time Cincinnati beat Ohio State was in the year 1897.
Oh God.
Just keep that in perspective.
And ironically, Luke Fickle coached there at one time too, but that's a whole other.
Well, we still got a lot of athletics to go on the American, including basketball. Kyle will be covering basketball and women's basketball, who lost to Auburn. And I'm actually going to blame women's basketball because they set the tone today for this bad day in UCF athletics. And the only way Cynthia Messer can make this up is by calling Kyle by his first name. That's Kyle Nash. Andrew, hey guys, seriously, thank you so much for the hard work. We're gonna do this again, I'm sure, for around bowl time. This was a unique day, not the result we all like, but hey, that's sports for you in a nutshell.
Shall live in infamy.
I guess we've learned if we're gonna leave the Big 12, make sure I'm guessing 2032. Make sure that we don't play in we'll lose the championship game in the Big 12.
What you're saying is wherever we go, we have to leave a big steamy one on our way out.
Yeah, evidently that's the deal there.
Always the classy Drew Glukov, ladies and gentlemen.
Great way to end on this segment, folks. Andrew Glukov, check him out. Knee Jerk Reaction on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Mr. Kyle Nash, he'll be at the basketball game Sunday. We'll have bowl coverage. We'll find out. We'll break down as soon as we know who the UCF's playing. They'll break it down as well. We'll have the podcast. Gentlemen, appreciate you taking the time on this record-setting marathon that is Night Shift.
On enjoying privilege, guys. Until next time, class dismissed.
Have a good night.
All right, those are the boys there talking a little football there. Wow, you guys, we're going over 2 hours here, Bryson. So I wanted to let them go because they have families there. So all right, Bryson, you've got me here. Let's wrap up this show. Talk a little volleyball. The volleyball season came to an end. The McKenna Melville era came to an end tonight. UCF losing to Penn State in 4 sets. In the second round, so the night season ends in the second round. Interestingly, while we were talking, congratulations to the Houston Cougars, who came from behind to beat Auburn in 5 sets to advance to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1994. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But Bryson, I am all yours. I know you've got questions. Fire away.
Well, first of all, Mr. Hampton 913, you are right. Let's not play a championship football game and a volleyball tourney game.
Amen to that. I blame volleyball. They could have scheduled this any other day, but no, they had to schedule this at 6:30. And so I had to split screen it. I mean, it was, oh my goodness. And
well, let's blame the NCAA for that, not necessarily the
technically
UCF.
Penn State, because they picked the dates. I mean, they could have played Thursday, Friday, or we could have hosted if we would have scheduled tougher, and we would have played. Well, actually, I think we would have played today too. But anyway, whatever. Go ahead. It is what it is. But yeah, tough day overall. No doubt about that. Well said, Mr. Hampton. I agree with you.
It was. So I wanted to go ahead and get into, because one of the things that I believe we talked about going into this matchup was that the middles were going to have to be a major factor if UCF were to win this matchup. So what do you think that the middles performed up to up to what they needed to do, and Penn State just kind of won the game, or do you think that the middles didn't really play to what they needed to?
I think at the end, and I'll use McKenna Melville's words, which was as emotional I've ever seen McKenna. And I've known McKenna since she walked on campus in 2018. I thought Claudia and Abby were good, but Penn State is still so big. They have so much width. And McKenna even said, Bryson, she had not seen a team like that big and powerful all year, like Penn State did. And, they played a good first set. Second set, Penn State went on this run, and, Cash Williams, who's one of the best players, had 17 kills. Zoe Weatherton had 16 kills. Katie Clark was the big star as far as the middles, 6 blocks, 10 kills for her. They had 11, and, they were dominant. Held UCF to 208 hitting offensively. Gave UCF fits offensively. McKenna ended with 20 kills, hit only 119, though. And this has been the story every year in the tournament, Bryson. Teams will focus on McKenna. They're going to put big bodies on her, and they're going to dare somebody else to beat you. I thought Heidi Bondi was great, 13 kills, 370. Kari Zumak, I thought, played her best match as a night, 12 kills, 455. You could tell that her playing in the Big Ten, playing at Indiana, playing in that court, she was comfortable there. Claudia had 9 and Hanser at 8. I thought they played good, but not good enough. Claudia was only hitting 222. Abby Hansen only hit 080, Bryce. Remember, these are 2 players in the top 10 in the country in hitting percentage. What that tells you is that Penn State's size really shut them down as far as their efficiency is concerned, and shut down this offense for UCF. And then Penn State gave UCF some issues with their size and power, and they hit 323 as a team. And, that was the story of the match to me. So no, I thought the middle was good, but not good enough.
I'm seeing the story that Kari Zumak and the kind of the journey that she took to get to UCF. I'm actually kind of glad that even though it did end in a loss, her volleyball career at least ended on a fairly solid game.
Great note for her. She played a fantastic match, and it's cool to see her look up to McKenna. She could tell how much she looks up to McKenna. I think McKenna's made a great impact on her as a person and a lot of things. I thought she ended up very well, represented herself very well, was really fantastic in this tournament.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking to myself, because you and I talked about this last night, but 25 years ago, there were a duo of players by the name of Renata Menchikova and Tyra Harper. Who you can find their names in the rafters of the venue, and they had their last game almost 25 years ago against another Big Ten team, Wisconsin, in the NCAA tournament. And at that point, they had made school history by getting the team's first ever NCAA tournament victory, I believe, against Clemson.
Straight set them. Yep, sweet. Yeah.
This time around, McKenna Melville and Amber Olsen were trying to close out their careers with school history of their own to make the Sweet 16 for the first time, and they end up falling short in this match against Clemson. I don't know if Amber
Penn State. No, Amber didn't talk. I know you're not surprised by that. You mentioned McKenna was emotional. Can you elaborate on that and what she had to say about finishing off? Well, you could tell she put her heart, her soul on this match. And Bryson, and you've covered her as I've covered her. The thing about her is she's so refreshing, as she's authentic. She speaks her mind. She will tell you how she feels. And she came back, and you were there a year ago when her and Amber announced they were coming back for the 5th year. And one of their goals was to win a 5th conference championship. and to get to that elusive Sweet 16. They were a set away against UCLA last year. Remember, they were up 2-1, had the lead in the fourth, didn't hold it. UCLA won it in 5. That was a motivating factor for her and Amber in this group to get that over the hump. And I thought they felt good. And she said they felt good. She said this was the most comfortable she's felt in an NCAA tournament court. Usually they have some nerves early on and things like that. She felt comfortable. They played well in that first set. Second set, Penn State kind of, responded as you would expect. I think the thing that's going to hurt when you look back at this match, Bryson, they led 13-9 in the third set. And I think they led 12-9 in the fourth set. Didn't hold. This was a team that usually closes out sets like that. Penn State didn't allow them to close the sets. They didn't close. Penn State made runs, had great big serves, and won those 2 sets. And again, they dared somebody else other than McKenna to beat it. Penn State was very comfortable saying, if we lose because of other players and not McKenna, that's fine. But we're not going to let McKenna dominate and beat us. And they put size on, and unfortunately, UCF just wasn't good enough. And unfortunately, that has been part of the story throughout this run of the NCAA tournament for UCF is other, and again, I thought Zumock played well, Bonnie played well, but Penn State just had too much.
What did head coach Todd Dagenais have to say?
He it was a few points here and there. He said 8 points was the difference. He's proud of this group, obviously, what they do on and off the court. He says it's going to take some time, and he's going to look back on it before they go in the Big 12. He hasn't really thought about the timetable and all this. I thought, this was an emotional deal. I mean, this is a tremendous senior class. And let's get this out of the way, Bryce. McKenna Melville's legacy is secured. She's the greatest volleyball player ever. She left it all on the court. I thought she was a tremendous representation for the university. She's a winner of the Order of Pegasus, right, Bryson?
Which is not just for athletes; it's for all UCF students. The highest award a UCF student. I could get this if I could.
Correct. I'm going to tweet later on about McKenna. I haven't had a chance to yet, but an amazing representation. A lot of people became volleyball fans because of her. Her legacy is secured. She's the greatest volleyball player ever. I know you've asked me this. Can she pass Harper and Menchikova? And I'm like, let's wait. Well, now we're here, Bryson. She is the greatest. She is the queen of UCF volleyball. She has the record. She has the accomplishments. And I'll never forget that match against Houston at home. It's the best volleyball match I've ever seen, Bryson. I've been going to volleyball for 20-plus years. I think it's better than the Cincinnati 19 match. Her and Amber winning that 5th title at home, it is a great way for them to go out. She's an amazing person. She will be successful as a teacher and a high school coach, and those students will be very benefited. And Amber Olsen, I think is a top 3 setter of all time at UCF volleyball. So great legacies for them. And Todd mentioned that as well. And I think Todd does I think deep down he's hurting a little bit. He won't, because this was a heck of a group. He's told me throughout the year, this team kind of coached itself, veteran group. And I think they really thought this was the year they were to get to the round of 16 and beyond, but it was not meant to be.
So you talk about how McKenna Melville is the greatest volleyball player this program has ever seen. I'm sure we'll do a true retrospective on where she stands in the all-time statistics rankings later. I'm sure we'll go all through that. But as far as tonight goes, they have made it to the NCAA tournament 5 straight times, and they've never made it out of the first weekend 5 straight times. I mean, look, obviously making the NCAA tournament is an achievement, but when you have somebody as good as McKenna Melville, as good as Amber Olsen, what do you think the thought is as far as the long-term future, as far as the future of this program? Because you had some of the best players this program has ever had, but we're not able to make it out of the first weekend.
Those are fair questions. I think that's a question this program is going to have to now. There's a couple questions they're going to have to move on. They're going to the Big 12. And the big question is going to be, for example, can this program win without McKenna? Okay. Let me give you this stat, Bryson. Pre-McKenna, from 2004 to 2017. You know how many times they made the NCAA tournament pre-McKenna from that time period, 04 to 17?
I'm going to say once.
That's correct, 2014. Now, McKenna arrives. They go to 5 straight NCAAs, 5 straight conference championships. Now, which he's moving on, can this program maintain a high level? Can they win without it? We've seen this in other sports. Bill Belichick, how's he doing without Tom Brady? Greg Popovich without Tim Duncan. Now the challenge for this program, you're going to a tougher league in the Big 12 without the greatest player of your program. Now you're supposedly this will help you recruit better players and all that. Size is a key factor they have to get. That's something McKenna brought up. She thinks that by going to the Big 12, they'll get even better players and be on more of an even playing field and so forth. But that's, that's a part of it that it's going to stick. It's going to stick with this program, fairly or not, is can they get over the hump? Can they get to a round of 16? Because we've had softball has done it. Women's tennis has done it. Women's soccer has done it over the years. And heck, they were PKs away from knocking out a team that's playing for the national championship at the College Cup. So the standard right now is as high as it's ever been at UCF in women's athletics. And that's just the reality of it. So unfortunately for volleyball, that is the question that many will ask and perhaps critique, is that they couldn't get over the Sweet 16. I don't know if this year would qualify on this. I personally think this is the best team Dagene's ever had. They just ran into Penn State. The schedule strength, Bryson, 107. If they could have had a better schedule strength, I think they would have hosted, and that could have made a difference. The one that's going to haunt, I think, to me, this era, 2018, you're hosting, you lose to Florida Gulf Coast in the opening round, Aaron Olsen out with an injury, and then the COVID season in Omaha, you're playing High Point in the first round and you lose in that match. Those are the two seasons I think that will certainly, sting for UCF more than this year, particularly because you ran into Penn State, or even last year, although last year you were a set away from UCLA. So tough, man.
Well, 2018, I think you can make the argument that McKenna was still a freshman back then. I think that she's a much better player now than she was then.
Absolutely.
And then as far as but now 2020, though, I think that's a big one. I also think that, last year, because I'll die on the hill saying that I think that if McKenna were not here, Anne-Marie Watson would have become the face of this program, because she did a lot of all-time, made the top 10 all-time in several statistics for this program. And even with her and McKenna together last year, they were not able to make it out of the second weekend again.
Tough. That stings.
It's at this point where, you think like maybe you don't just need one McKenna, you may need two. I mean,
no, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair point. Here's what stings about it. Houston just got to the Sweet 16. They just did it. They did it on the road. Beat South Dakota in 5, came back and beat Auburn in 5. Cincinnati did it in 2019 with Jordan Thompson. That's what's going to sting is as you go to the Big 12, BYU's been to the round of 16. That's what stings, is a team you just literally beat on the court 7 days ago, just got to the Sweet 16. Could UCF have won that regional in Creighton? Maybe, perhaps. But they didn't go to that regional, and that's what it is. That's the draw. I mean, it is what it is. You got to take advantage. It reminds me of softball in 2015 when Renee Dolores Gillespie had Mackenzie Audis, Shelby Turnier, 2 All-American aces, won 50 games. But their schedule strength wasn't good enough, so they were sent to Tallahassee, and they lost in that regional final. And honestly, I don't think Renee, and from her standpoint, I'm a big Renee fan, as you know. I owe a lot of my career to her. The program wasn't the same after that loss. And look how long it took, Bryson, for softball to bounce back. Really, if you think about it, 6 years to get, 7 years later with a new coach and Cindy Ball Malone got over the hump. They finally won a regional. They hosted and they won. How long is it going to take volleyball to get over the hump? It will certainly not be easier going to the Big 12 for sure.
Well, Mr. Hampton 913 mentioned next year will tell us how much more further the volleyball program needs to go. Texas in there last year, Houston and BYU joining the Big 12 with teams like Baylor sticking around is tough.
Fair. No, you're going from an 8th place league to the #1 conference RPI league. There are no gimmies in this league. There is no Temples and East Carolinas, with all due respect to those schools.
Wait, so you're saying that even though the Big 10 has the volleyball reputation, the Big 12 actually has the RPI better?
RPI-wise, the RPI likes the Big 12 slightly more than the Big 10, and you can make the argument the Big 12 is a little deeper this year than the Big 10. I personally still think the Big 10 has the national title contender, so I think they're #1. But I think the Big 12 could certainly say they're #2.
Maybe
#2.
Maybe 1A, 1B.
Could be, especially as long as Texas is there. To his point, Texas is the favorites to play for the national title. Now, I want to make a quick point here, Bryson. We will not have video of the post-game, things beyond our control on that. So there is no post-game video that we'll see on the Banneret YouTube channel, unfortunately. But we will have other stuff. But I will say this real quick, Bryson. Todd said after the match, one of the things he's going to try to do is make sure he's happy, makes himself a better person, a happier person. Really hasn't thought about the future as far as where to go. Obviously, just losing. You're thinking about you're going to play next week. So interesting to see what happens with volleyball moving forward as they get set to go to the Big 12. I think a lot of questions, obviously, life without McKenna. You're going to have to replace her. You don't replace her, but you're going to have somebody who steps in that outside hitter role. You lose Zumock there. You have a setter situation where Amber graduates. Do you go with Chalmers, Abby, who's the freshman who redshirted? Do you go to the portal for a setter? Those are some of the questions for this program as they get into the Big 12.
Well, I'll say this. At the very least, I am at least comforted by the fact that we have a capable outside hitter in Heidi Bonde. I think that Heidi,
I thought she was fantastic again, by the way. Second year in a row, she was good at the tournament. I agree. I'm excited about what she can bring to the table.
Yes. So like, let's back up, because yes, we are losing McKenna, but I think that we are in a good position despite that. Like, losing the biggest star you've had in this program's history is bad. But I think we have a solid net to fall back on, not only with the outside hitter role and Heidi Bonde, who is really great once again, but also in the middles, because both Claudia Dillon and Abby Hansen are coming back for next season. They have extra years of eligibility. They didn't walk for senior night. I think the signs are pointing to both of them coming back for next season, in this first season of the Big 12. I mean, how big is it to have these two middles kind of set and ready for the Big 12?
Huge. I would argue they're going to be the two best players, at least that we know of right now, going into the season. That's going to be a strength, and you have to be strong in that position to compete in the Big 12. So that's a good start. That's a good start, and I think they'll be pretty good. But I think we're a little naive. It's going to be tough to duplicate this year's team, and
Well, not to mention, you also have Chloe Shear and Caitlin Grimes
on the backside. You're right, back line. Yeah.
And the two of them, I mean, like I've been watching them grow since they were underclassmen last season.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I noticed that the Penn State, I think, was going to Shear a good bit on their kill attempts. And so I think for Shear, the more experience she has against the high profile opponents, both for her and Grimes, the better their defensive capability will be. So I think really the big thing is going to be who is going to make up for the dig difference, because Amber and McKenna were really piled up on the dig. Chloe Shear had a lot of digs herself, but I mean, can she be able to handle that load going forward, at least as far as in system goes?
Well, and again, the setter position, that's the quarterback position in volleyball. You don't replace an Amber Olsen, especially as up-tempo as they like to go offensively. Do they go with the youngster Chalmers, who redshirted this year? Do they go with a transfer portal? We will see. I think it's going to be an interesting offseason, Bryson, for volleyball for many reasons as they try to figure this out, as they try to compete in the Big 12 for the first year.
Agreed. I think, I think that the big thing with volleyball, and I think it's also kind of a thing with football as well, is that it seems like these last years in the American for them are very bittersweet. And because football, by all intents and purposes, I think had, on like a general program level, a solid season. Because remember, you have programs that are going 6-6. You have the South Floridas of the world. The fact when you see what's going on with South Florida, you kind of look at yourself and think, like, you know what?
Oh, listen. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably get into this more as we get around Christmas time. But think of the calendar year this year, especially in women's sports, softball with the historic year. Women's soccer, man, they just pushed UCLA, who's playing for the national title in PKs. Volleyball sucking around another conference title, great crowds. I mean, there's a lot of positives to build it, and I think volleyball had a good season for sure. And but look, let's just leave it. Let's end it with this. McKenna Melville, we definitely a lot of people, I think, on behalf of Knight Nation, thank you. I think she provided so much great moments for this program, took this program on her shoulders to a different level, class on and off the court, honest. It's going to be strange, Bryson, come fall when we go to the first match for UCF in volleyball and number 20 is not on the court. That's going to be very bizarre. And,
it will be.
you know, JB Gilbert, I thought said interesting. He's like, for McKenna, we should just waive the 7-year Hall of Fame requirement and just put her in. I thought that's, you know what, if you're going to do it for anybody, I wouldn't mind her on the list.
I agree. I wouldn't mind either. I would love to see her get inducted. If anything, I mean, I'd love to see her get.
She's going to get inducted. She'll get inducted. It's just a matter of when, not if. She'll get inducted, and I think she'll be on the Ring of Honor sooner than later as well.
I think I will say this. Not only do I want to say thank you to McKenna Melville, because to be completely honest, I think because I had barely had any background with volleyball before visiting UCF volleyball. I saw a few games at my high school where Emery Watson actually went to high school, but I didn't really see volleyball all that much. It wasn't until UCF volleyball where I really kind of sat down and really watched a volleyball game for the first time. And McKenna, I think, and the way that she played the game, the intensity that she played with it, really hooked me on the sport. And Todd has said it before, like, you know, come to a game and we'll get you hooked. And I was. And McKenna Melville was a huge part of that. I want to thank her for that. I also want to thank Amber Olsen and the entire Olsen family, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great call.
Aaron Olsen has, you know, she was the setter, I believe, before Amber.
Correct.
And now, and Amber took over from her. I mean, we're going to have it, not only have a UCF volleyball program without McKenna Melville, we're also going to have one, at least on the court, without an Olsen.
No, that's fair. Great point.
I'm sure Aaron could easily still be around as director of operations. That's a role, Aaron Olsen's role within the program now. But as far as on the court, there isn't, as far as on the court playing surface, there isn't going to be another Olsen. And I think I want to be able to say thank you to both of them for their on-court achievements, because I don't think you could have asked for better setters for McKenna than those two.
Agreed 100%. You're right. That's a great point. It'll be weird not to see an Olsen listed in the lineups there for sure. Two-time setter of the year, and I think McKenna would be the first to tell you a lot of her success is part because of her. So, yeah, that's a great point on that. It's going to be weird, man. A heck of an era. What an era. Maybe the best era in Division I volleyball era history for UCF volleyball. Ends tonight, unfortunately, and against Penn State. But, man, what a cool experience to go out against the premier volleyball program in the sport, a 7-time national champion on that court. I mean, there could be worse places to end your season than that. I mean, that's a pretty cool. I know it's not what they wanted, but I mean, the fact that they're playing Penn State in a round of 32 in a tight match speaks volumes how they have carried this program to that point. So
with a share of the conference title for 5 years, mind
you, 5 straight with an incredible match against Houston. It's a match I'll never forget.
At the very least, they can say that I think that you know, I mentioned the parallel of 25 years ago where Nada Menchikova and Tyra Harper ended their career with a loss in the NCAA tournament to a Big Ten team. In their case, Wisconsin. In this case, Penn State. They were both history makers in this program. McKenna Melville and Amber Olsen are the same here for this UCF volleyball program. I think it's honestly only fitting.
It's very eerie, very eerie.
I also will say that it's very eerie that, you know, we're kind of coming to an end of a lot of these, you know, at least this larger era of all these major women athletes on campus at the exact same time, because you had Diamond Battles, McKenna Melville, and Kristen Scott. They're going to be gone. And then you have Jada Cody, Shannon Doherty, Renaya Jones. Just have all of these female athletes on campus at the exact same time is honestly,
it's a golden era. It's a golden era, and I've been blessed.
See the decline in it, and it'll be a little eerie. And although I'm very intrigued to see what everyone does next. Tia Messer, I mean, Grant, they had a great start to the season. They just ran into a really
we got plenty of time for that.
We have time to talk about that.
Let's wrap this up. We're going near on 3 hours, a record-breaking night shift here. Tough day for UCF athletics, but you know what? We're playing for high stakes, so a lot of schools are not doing that. So, but again, thanks to McKenna and the group. What a great memories for volleyball. And we'll see what happens here in the fall, in the off season as they get set for the Big 12. Men's basketball, women's basketball continue on in the winter. And then before you know it, folks, 60+ days, baseball and softball season gets going in 2023. So still a lot to look forward to. Let's wrap it up. Everybody that's tuned in throughout this marathon of a night shift show, thank you very much for all the questions and comments. I hope we were able to at least help answer questions and get through this tough day. It was a tough football loss, no question about it. Congrats to Tulane for doing it. We'll see where UCF ends up in the bowl game. Thank you to Bryson. You and I think we did this quarterback shuffle here a little better than maybe UCF did at times this year. I think we figured that we complemented each other as I was doing the volleyball stuff there. And then thanks to Kyle and Drew for their participation on this show and throughout the season. It's been the most successful year yet of Night Shift as this show continues to grow. We'll have, I'm sure, more night shifts down the road, especially as we figure out the bowl game situation and beyond. Keep it on Black and Gold Banneret for all the latest on UCF. Anything else, Bryson, I forget?
You can follow me at It's Bryson Turner on Twitter. You can follow Eric at Eric O. Lopez Elo. And while we may not have the post game from tonight's volleyball matchup on there, you can still watch this show again if you missed any part of it, or you can watch other post game shows to reminisce about the era that is the era of McKenna Melville on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel. And be sure to subscribe if you have not yet to get all the latest content that we put up on there.
Folks, this has been a blast. Hope you all enjoyed it. If didn't enjoy the result, but at least the content, hope we helped out. Thanks for tuning in. Keep it here. Subscribe, follow podcast. We'll have a podcast later this week and much more. So for Bryson, for Drew, for Kyle, and everybody at Black Gold Banneret, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Night Shift. Good night.